This is what we're talking about today. What theater criticism is, what is happening to theater criticism in this era of internet. So for everyone who is seeing us all over the world, this is a question that we are trying to answer today. And we'll answer it, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'll leave you the stage. And then if you, I will say we'll do a chat, and then if you have questions, we open for questions from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that we get everybody's voice in here.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Laura. Again, my name is Robert Gagno. I run a podcast called Go See a Show. And so when we talk about theater criticism in the social media world, I have two thoughts. One is that I'm not a critic. That's not what I do. And I made that very clear when I was asked to do this. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not a critic. But hopefully my voice will help contribute to the conversation, because that's what my podcast is. It's conversation about independent theater. And so without the whole social media / digital revolution, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to have these conversations about independent theater. So I guess I have sort of a difficult relationship with this idea. I don't necessarily see it as a problem, but of course there are problems inherent with what is happening to those who are on the more critical side of things. And for that, I'll pass it over to the gents who are actually doing criticism.
I thought it was going to be last.
Well, all right, I'll just kind of wing it. I'm what used to be called a theater critic. Nowadays that term has changed quite a bit. It used to be you had to read the newspaper in the morning to get your theater criticism, and you had people who did that, traditionally. And over the last, since the internet became more and more usable, you've had a lot of people who just, write on the internet. And, the first thing I think we need to say is that theater criticism is important, and it's well, and it's good, and it's constructive, and it's informed, but anybody who goes and sees a show has an opinion. And the opinion of someone who's seeing their first show and loves it is as valid as the opinion of anyone else. So theater critics, you could say, as you alluded to, there's a certain assumption of experience and education, which can help inform, when we go see a dazzling new play like we had one just the other day. It's helpful to be able to explain, not just say it's good, but to say why we think it's good, why you might like it, what it does that we haven't seen before. Whereas a newer critic or someone just voicing their opinion can also say, I've never seen, give it a wonderful, if you love the show, you love the show. It doesn't matter how much you know about anything else. And the fact is that people who create theater aren't really interested as much in what the small section of the audience who goes and sees everything. They're not so interested in how it affects them. They're interested in how it affects everyone. And part of the value of the theater critics, either print or media or blog, is to say to people who don't know about the play, there are a lot of shows going on right now, but this is one you might be interested in seeing. Mm-hmm. And if that message gets out to the prospective audience, that's what's important, not who the message is coming from. Now you can talk.
Before I just want to ask you briefly to introduce New York Stage Review, what it is about, because you just when you started.
We started this a few months ago. That's the Skype. Oh, it's you. Okay. What's been happening, as I said, over the years is that there are less and less print outlets that print theater reviews. There was a time when there were 8 daily newspapers in New York. at present there are like 3, and now a couple of them aren't even covering theater because, coverage means money, means advertising. So within our group of critics who have been longtime print critics, we're finding less and less places to print our reviews. And many of us over the course of time have started doing online reviews at various places. And what happened in the last few months is that as several more of the outlets closed up, 6 of us got together and said, why don't we put together a website where we can keep reviewing, because we all have readership. People have been reading us for years, and our opinions are valued, at least to some extent, by some of our readers. So we decided to, create our own space where we could continue reviewing shows, and it turns out that that's proven to be valuable because people do want to read, and we also offered, we try to offer 2 opinions on every production, which is also interesting because nobody is likely to like everything, and anybody is likely not to like something. And if your side happens to have a critic who, for whatever reason, didn't like Hamilton, that's not to say that Hamilton isn't any good, which your readers might think if all they've read is that this guy didn't like it. So we offer 2 reviews, and sometimes we think totally alike, and sometimes one of us loves it and one of us hates it. But our whole aim is to get people, basically, as I said, I just saw this great show the other night, which nobody might know about. People might not know about it, and we want to tell prospective viewers that there's great theater here or there, or this one you might not want to waste your money on. But that's the message we want to get out.
And Jose, can you first tell us what stage body is? What for the audience? Some of them they don't know.
Absolutely. This is in fact a very strange time for me to be talking about stage body because I was actually laid off last week.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Stage body I think will still continue to be. It's a very small publication, and I was the chief theater critic for 5 years or so. But you know how the industry is, and companies run out of money and stuff. Sure. So rather than talking about stage ready, I think I would love to talk about, I love the internet, and the internet made me a critic. I guess I'm gonna have to be the person that points out the elephant in the room, and it's the fact that this panel is completely comprised of men, and I'm the only person of color. So the internet gives women and people of color the opportunity to share their opinions and to also tell their stories. So without the internet, I wouldn't be a critic. I grew up in a third world country. I grew up in Honduras. It's one of the most violent, poorest countries in at least the continent. And there's no theater criticism. There's not even theater there. We had film criticism, but the last working film critic in my home country retired in the 1970s. Like, I wasn't even born when he retired. So, but I grew up reading online film and theater criticism, and I ended up going to film school. I didn't go to drama school or anything. But the internet gave me the preparation, and it gave me the wings, so to speak, to, once social media started and you could reach out to critics that you were only reading, it gave me the opportunity to feel like I was their equal and train. And, even if I have an informal theater education, I've been published in the New York Times, American Theater Magazine, Time Out, Backstage, and I also have a web series on American Theater Magazine, which is, again, it's the only, theater criticism thing, I don't know what to call it, like product of its kind that's completely hosted by people of color. So the internet gives us a voice, so I have only good things to say about the internet.
And sorry, the web series, because I heard about, and how does it work in a web series? It's like a regular program that could be in TV, but is on the web that you see every week, every month or something?
this one, it's called Token Theater Friends, and it's hosted by American Theater Magazine. And right now we're doing 2 episodes a month, and we discuss 3 shows and also do interviews. And then we do like little opinion, like rants. And you know, but what excites us the most about the web series is giving people our age and people of color the opportunity to engage with us, because that's something that, you know, not most, you know, traditional white male critics do. Like, it's like you can't reach out to some of the New York Times critics on Twitter, for instance.
Yeah. Well, we go to Sergio.
Yeah.
Yes. Try to explain a little bit what Teatro Critica does. How did it start, and also, you know, I know that you also know about Europe, what is going on in Europe a little bit, because you travel a lot.
Yeah. I've been traveling. First of all, and thank you for having me today. And I'm afraid I can see only 2 of you out of 3 there, but I can hear you.
No,
quite.
Are 3.
Yeah, but that's fine. So yes, about something about myself. I've been working for Teatro Critica now for almost 10 years. Teatro Critica is an independent web magazine which is based in Rome, Italy, and it's covering national about theater and dance and performing arts, generally speaking. And it's you already addressed many of main topics for us critics today, because I trained as a theater student in the early 2000s, and I discovered that I wanted to find a way to put together 2 of my passions, were theater on one side and writing on the other side, and probably theater criticism was the best way to do it. Unfortunately, we all know that the crisis of newspaper, print, and printed press some ways migrated all the discourse about theater criticism online, and this created a lot of problems, of course. What we did with Teatro Critica is that we, first of all, I want to say that we met going to theater, going to see the shows. You know, you look around and see people that some ways are quite like you, so you start talking about, and then you discover that you can disagree with something. I strongly believe that criticism has this fortune that you can finally disagree with someone, because you normally agree with yourself. So we started disagreeing, and we decided to build up a collective. And the word collective, for me, has become one of the most important words in this field of work, because we built it up, this collective. We were usually, we used to be 3 people, and then now we are 10 or 11, and it depends on the period of time. And then we decided that we wanted to build up a new reality online, but on the other hand, try to understand which kind of paradigms coming from the printed press we were able to import into the online publishing. So we decided to work as a collective. That means that, for example, for give you some examples, we meet for an editorial meeting once a week, which is something quite rare in Italy, especially if you work on online publishing, which is much more often managed by one director that sends all the writers all around, and they get accredited for the show, and then basically just send an article. But we work differently. We meet and we work together, like 10 brains together, and we develop new ideas, we develop new projects, and then we decide together who is going to go and see this, and what we're going to talk about in the next days and the next weeks. And I think that this is really important, the collective part of the work. Otherwise, you know, you come across this idea that criticism is something relegated into one person's opinion, and I think that this is completely wrong, because goes on the contrary, critics should be always dividing and should be always creating dissent much more than consent. So what we did is to work online, and as you know, as we all know, working online means working with no money. I mean, we do some money by advertising, but that's just enough to, to pay for travel costs if we want to go and see something somewhere else. But I must say that one of the most important things we did in the years, it was to discover how this collective thing was important also for the community of theatre, because at least in Italy, the theatrical community is one of the closest and biggest and strongest one, also because money crisis and systemic problems. But when you address such a close community, close in a positive sense, I mean, you discover that you have to talk with them and to be part of that community. So one thing that we did, which is strongly important for us, is that we started to do workshops for spectators, not really to train new critics. Well, hopefully, yes, at the beginning at least, but not just for this, but just to spread the news of what's going on in new languages and new experimental attempts by these independent groups, because nowadays Italy very much works on not only young people, but people who really believe in their research. So, for example, if you in the summertime around Italy, we are full of these summer festivals, and it's the perfect opportunity to get in touch with this strong community. So I must say, I wanted to finish this saying this, that one of the most important things that I discovered is that critics, at least in Italy, my environment must be part of the community and of the system. And you asked me about Europe, because that's true. I've been traveling around Europe quite often in these late years, because I've been into these huge European well-financed projects. And I discovered that it's pretty much the same everywhere. I mean, there are some countries, and I'm quite sure that US are part of these countries, in which the professional job critics must be protected and must be conserved, but still has kind of power, again, not in a negative way, but in an effective way. Power, and you discover that when you go, for example, to Edinburgh Festival in England, well, in Scotland, sorry, in summer, that you can find out how critics can be relevant for the fortune of a company. But in Italy and many other parts of Europe, it's different. Now that professional figure is going lower and lower, is decreasing in power. So you have to discover new ways to make a difference towards the artists, that they are, in fact, our first material to look at and to learn from, in my opinion. That's not.
Oh, sorry. Did you finish? Yeah.
Finished.
I have one more question, then I'll give also the chair to Carlotta to continue. But my question is for the three of you. I know you're the moderator, but I have this question. Because it's very interesting. In New York, for instance, if a show gets a New York Times review, suddenly it's sold out. I mean, people really, yeah. No? You don't think so?
Not as much as it used to be.
But still, is there like, more than any other review? It's like the New York Times is kind of the DOC of theater. So how much the new media contribute really to bring people to the theater? Because, for instance, my company is an off-theater company often. it's off. I've seen a lot of web magazine trying to cover Broadway, like the New York Times, and I wonder why, if you are a media that is an internet and you can do, everything, why you wanna cover what is already covered by everyone and not going show by show in little places. So what I see, and I'm not saying that everyone is doing it, but there is a tendency of, I am more established if I cover Broadway, or I am more established if I interview a famous person. You know what I want to say?
Right.
Yeah.
Part of the, there are issues there. Part of it is most people are assigned what to see, and the assignments are made by the editors, and the editors want to print or post items that they think people will read. There's a difference between New York theater and most other places in that, in other cities, you might have 10, 12, 20 shows a night, whereas here you have 150. There are theaters all over, so there's more to keep up with.
Yeah.
Part of what convinced us to start the group that we have was the fact that there are a lot of good new plays, important new work, and it usually comes from smaller theaters, not from Broadway. By the time it gets to Broadway, if it gets. But for example, there was a show a few years ago called Natasha, Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, which began in a theater that I believe was 85 seats on the far west side, a nonprofit with very little money and very little coverage, very little media. And a few of us, meaning we were, of the mainstream critics, for whatever reason, went to see it and immediately embraced it, and it was quickly sold out. And I don't think that the Times was one of the people who covered it, but because it was only 80 seats, it's not so difficult to sell out 80 seats for a 4-week run. And based on that, there were then 2 more productions before it finally got to Broadway. But the critics did embrace it early on, and that did help. But in terms of your question, what does one cover? We are trying to cover all Broadway, because you need to have credibility as a critic. You need to be able to address what's there, which you can't necessarily do just by going to off Broadway. But we have tried to give an outlet, as the newspapers have been cutting their coverage. We're saying there's nobody covering off Broadway unless there's a big star in it, let alone off Broadway or the regionals. So that's part of what we're trying to do. But people need to cover it, and critics need to choose what they're assigned to, but also what they wish to cover. So it becomes difficult to cover everything. Sure. Or even, and we're bombarded with press releases of shows all over, and to some extent we read them and we think, is there reason to pay attention to this, even though it's at a place we haven't gone to many times. And there are theaters which we suddenly go to, like Bushwick Star, for example, St. Anne's, where we suddenly say, oh yeah, we should be covering what they're doing because they're doing important things. Can I just respond to something that Jesse said before? Jose said before. There have been all these wonderful new plays in the last really 10 years, and many of them are written and directed by either women or people of color, which was not the case before this last period. Before, it was very difficult for them to even get a chance to do theater. And you're getting a new audience that is going to see these plays, which is not just your traditional theater goers. And what's concerning to me and several of my colleagues is that we can guide you to these plays, but these plays are now playing to a wider audience, which includes everybody. And there should be a generation of new critics who don't come from have the same background as us, who can also speak on the plays, because that's the audience that the shows are addressing. But there isn't that visibility because there are less and less places. Even if you're a wonderful critic and you're here and you're ready to go and work for the Times or a mainstream press, even the people who've been doing it for years can't get those jobs anymore. They don't exist. So how do you get this new generation, or I should say, people writing about theater who can address it from a different viewpoint? Because that's important, and it's important today, but in 10 years, it'll be even more important because all the traditional critics will be 80. And so there's a need for that group of theater critics, which is not really, they're not being encouraged to work. As it happens, our group is 6, and we do have 2 women there, and our overall group, the New York Drama Critics Circle, which is, I think, in its 85th year, we just had our 85th awards yesterday, which was all male for decades and decades, but now I think of the 30 members, I think that 10 of them are women. So it is changing, but women under 30 or men under 30 or non-Native Americans or people of color or very few of them are in our in the field because they don't have a place to write and work and be heard, and it's not. You were mentioned about education. A college education for a theater critic is not important. The theater critic should be able to write in a comprehensible way. But the education is from seeing shows and reacting to shows and seeing what you like, and more importantly, being able to describe what it is that you see and why you like it. And that doesn't come from college or from any sort of background. That comes from being able to sit there and react. So I do think that we do need new critics, and we basically, starting our group, we weren't going to do it without some women critics, of which there are some wonderful ones around, but we also need people who are available to do it. I've been talking too long. Can I pass this to somebody?
I would just I want to help refocus the conversation a little bit, because everything that's been brought up, I think, comes down to, at least this is why I've been scribbling furiously over here. It seems like a lot of things come down to 2 different kind of issues that have arisen with the change in criticism. And the first is the relationship of the power of an organization to make or break a show, or say, give their opinion and say this opinion is the correct opinion, and the relationship between that, diffusing that power, which I think is actually really great, but then that relationship to quality and perception of quality, which is 2 very different things. So I want to talk a little bit about that. What does it mean that now everybody has a voice, which is great. We have all said, as you pointed out, it's really great that everyone has the opportunity to say this show is worth seeing because, but as you also said, sometimes writing is more comprehensible than others. Sometimes people have more informed opinions. What is that criticism doing? What is the point of it? So that's one thread, the relationship between power and quality of criticism. And that relationship also really speaks to something that you brought up in the fact, Jose, that you've just recently been laying off. The relationship between criticism and money. If you want someone
There's no connection.
Well, there's no connection at all, because I pay to run Go See a Show. I've never gotten any reward out of this other than the fact that that whole they tell you're a critic. I claim I'm quote unquote press, and all of a sudden I get tickets to the theater. So that's really great. But I pay for my server costs. I pay to make this thing happen, and there's so many of us, if we want to be critics or we want to be someone who's engaging in a conversation about the theater, we're not getting paid to do so, at least not on the scale that we used to, as Jose has illustrated. And you brought it up as well, Sergio. There's this issue of, can you afford to do this? So I also want to bring that up as well. What is the relationship between criticism and money?
Okay. I guess everything should go back also to the fact that going to the theater itself is pretty much impossible to afford. So, one of the things that I've struggled with the most is, I think ever since theaters began, people have been saying that theater's dying, right? But when you see, like for instance, when I go to a Broadway show, and I will look, especially when I go to Lincoln Center, I will look around me, and there'll be like 2 people of color. The ticket prices can only be afforded by older white people. So it's this like, there's so many different vicious cycles in theater. Like they're not making things that attract non-white people, and then when they do, non-white people can't afford them. Like, I mean, I don't think anyone can afford tickets to go see Denzel Washington and the Iceman Comet, for instance. So it's like over $200, which is crazy. And also in terms of what you were talking about earlier about content, there's a very toxic, I would say, relationship with publicists and the ways that they distribute, or the ways, like publicists usually are the ones who assign who gets to see what. They're the gatekeepers. And for instance, I've seen many instances where they will, like for instance, at Stage Buddy, we would do this fantastic interview or this fantastic piece with someone, but the publicist would not even put it on Twitter or Facebook. Instead, when we tweet it or put it on Facebook, they'll like it. But let's say the New York Times takes a picture off a street and there's a sign with the name of the show, that they'll put all over. So I feel that in many ways, publicists have come out pretty unscathed in this whole, dynamic and this conversation. So I would hope that at some point publicists are also part of panels like this, because they're the gatekeepers in the end. They are the ones who choose to let their followers know and the general audience what people are saying about shows. And the other thing is that when we started at Stage Buddy, for instance, we were only covering off-Broadway and off-Broadway shows. Publicists then wouldn't give us tickets to those shows because we weren't covering Broadway. But then Broadway wouldn't give us tickets to Broadway shows because we were only covering off and off-Broadway. So we could have like 40 different panels just on this specific problem, I think.
It's accurate. What I will say for the publicists is that they're working for the producers. So, they're given a quota of tickets. And, some show, it's been the case that the shows more in demand have been difficult to get tickets for, even for established critics. But it goes back to that same question of the audience of today and tomorrow is not your middle-aged white people from New Jersey. And some of the publicists and some of the producers are realizing that and saying, well, the tickets are expensive because that's what they have to be. But that's the audience we need to address. Now, I don't know how this enters into anything, but in terms of your question about social media, we all know the Book of Mormon. And if you remember when that opened, of course they got great reviews and they were on every bus and taxi and every place you looked. But at the same time, they were running ads with quotes from social media in the ads. I actually did the coffee table book for the Book of Mormon, and the producers, the publicists, they were very interested. They were trying to get in all these social media comments into the book and into the discussion. And as I say, they would run paid ads using these social media comments, even when they had great reviews anyway. Now, at the time, I really had little understanding of what the social media even was, but I know that they were very concerned and impressed and catering to getting people to participate. So there is a bit of an awareness of how important that is, because indeed, less and less people read the newspapers, and less people read the newspaper reviews. So it's beginning to be recognized. In terms of the press agents offering tickets, it is a problem. But it's a problem also for all coverage. But they're basically told what to do by the producers. What I'm hoping to do is get some discussion, like you say, because there's, in addition to the press agents and the producers, there's also the league, which is the organization that handles Broadway. And there are pockets within all those groups of people who say, yeah, the people who are going to buy tickets to the sort of shows we produce are not the people who read the newspapers. So what needs to happen is for more people to see the importance of that. Because as I say, if we just go with the situation as it is now, in 20 years, all of these critics and all of these audience members who buy the tickets now won't be there anymore. And the theater's been great in encouraging new playwrights with new ideas and new directors. We were having a discussion yesterday that there are I can name 6 or 7 wonderful women directors working right now on Broadway or off Broadway. All of whom are, have wonderful ideas, and they're all different, and they're all doing great work. And 12 years ago, they couldn't get a job. So there's more, there's more recognition of this now, but it hasn't translated so much to the money side and to the press side. But everyone's saying, yes, bring in new audiences. Please bring in new audiences. But you need to reach those new audiences, and you also need to be able to find a way to make the shows affordable. Because the 20-year-olds of today who want to go theater and love theater, in 20 years they'll be 40 years old, and they will be the people who will have to be able to support the theater. But if you don't get them going now, they're not going to go later.
Sergio, what's your view on that?
Well, of course, I'm quite far from some of the issues you addressed, like off Broadway, off Rome. But I think that I have this view that if we come across these issues like politics or power, or for example women presence, or people of color, for example, I think that everything leads you to consider who are you, which is your audience, or audiences, I would say. And that's exactly why I was insisting before about being part of the community. Also because you said it before, I think that one of the biggest problems we are facing for journalists, I have a background in journalism, is that when you work online, you don't even work online anymore. You work on social media, first of all. Because nowadays, if we look at the analytics, the websites, we can see that a very small percentage of readers reaches our web pages through search engines or typing Critica.net on the browser. Almost the totality reaches us via social media, Facebook mainly. So this means that in my opinion, you come across a huge paradox, because on the one hand, you have this theater community, which, as I said in Italy, is really strong. We are very few people, but very committed to go and see the show, very committed to create, to produce, to see, compared to any other fields. On the other hand, you have this community that you see online and you read about on status updates, for example, which is not the same community. I mean, it is in terms of names and surnames and people that you can recognize by their profile pictures. But when you go and meet the people in real presence, like shake hands, everything changes, because even though this distinction between online life and offline life, about this, about Zygmunt Bauman used to talk about this, world now is divided in online and offline, and this distinction is clearly erasing, because we are always attached to this phone. I cannot pick because I'm using it for Skype right now. But the thing is that this is why I think that nowadays we strongly need or a closer and more in presence contact and relationship with artists, people that really do these kind of. To me, it's the only way. Otherwise, it's inevitable that you go under a power structure that practically you can control, but you cannot, because we know, like for example, with the last algorithm in Facebook that changed, and nowadays you see a maximum of 26 people on your wall. That means that you are talking to the same people, and that's why when you address the audience, like theater does, fact, like performing arts do, that they try to expand their audience in the best case. We should do the same. We should go and find not new audiences, not necessarily, but address the same audience as the theater does, and try to interact with them, trying to foster a communication and foster a discourse, actually, a discussion and a dissent again. So to finish, I would say that interaction is my keyword now, and that's why I'm really interested in what you said about the difference between the role that you play in the society. If I got it right, the difference between the role that you play in the society and the role that you play in communities, which is not exactly the same, especially when 90% of your relationships are driven by some structures and architecture, technological architecture, that you cannot control at all whatsoever.
Speaking of interaction with audiences, I think that's a good segue to open it up. We've been snaking around through a lot of different issues, I think, about what's going on with criticism and where things are at. And I would invite you all to ask this group of folks up here your opinion or your questions about, just to give it a little bit of structure, what are you missing? What do you want from criticism? I'm guessing everyone that's here is here because you're involved in the theater or go to the theater or love the theater in some way, and you're maybe engaging with criticism, or hopefully you are, you know? What are you missing? What do you want out of criticism that maybe you're just not getting right now?
Cosa vorreste dalla critica teatrale che non avete questo ad oggi? Cosa manca secondo voi?
Happy to pass the microphone around if anyone wants to.
Or if anyone has any other questions.
Or any, yeah, it doesn't have to be on my prompt.
To me, sorry, no, go ahead.
Your criticism is based on what? Entertainment, on education, or you leave it to the audience to make judgment? What is your main purpose of the criticism?
I will start with, as a not critic, the main purpose of my criticism is to spread the word about what I always tell people before I do an interview. This is a conversation about what you made and why you made it. And I feel like that's a really great place to start if someone's going to be interested in the show, to hear the thoughts of the creators and artists behind it. That's my point. That's my purpose with Go See a Show.
Yeah, I don't think that the purpose of a critic is to say whether it's good or bad. I think the purpose is to say, this is what I liked about it and what you might be interested in. Or this is what I didn't like about it, but you might be interested in. So I don't want to tell you whether you should go or not. And people who've read my reviews for years, sometimes they agree with me, and sometimes they don't agree with me. And they might say, well, you know, I agree with him on musicals, but when he's talking about esoteric modern theater, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, that's fine. So we're not really here to tell you what's good. We're here to give you the information so you can decide what you want to invest your time and money in.
Well, for me, criticism is an invitation to conversation. So I would have to say that I think that criticism is not a statement or a final opinion, or like a judge's, you know, like sentencing or whatever. It's basically saying, hey, I'm saying what I think, but I really want to hear from you also.
Sergio?
Yeah, I'll try and do the same. For me, I think that judgment it still is quite important for criticism. As I said before, to be able to disagree even with yourself, because it sometimes happens to me that at the first sight, I really love that show, and then I consider all the aspects, not only what is going on the stage, but especially what's going on in the context, because sometimes the same show in different contexts tells you completely different things. So judgment in this light can be important, but I agree with the guy that I can see now on my left, when he says that it's conversation, first of all. And I think that reviewing probably it's not the definition that really defines, sorry for the joke, that really defines our job nowadays. It's more creating some channels, a debate and discussion. So, I mean, nobody gives, no, I don't want to be rude. So nobody is interested in what I like or dislike, but probably they can reach through my opinion and through my narrative, they can reach some other point of view. And I think that this is important for theater and any other arts.
Any other questions out there?
I'm wondering how it makes it for criticism with how lately there have been a lot of productions that are either productions that have come back or commercial productions. Like we look at this season on Broadway and we have Mean Girls, we have Frozen, we have SpongeBob, we have My Fair Lady, we have Carousel. It's not a lot of new stories coming up. It's a lot of commercial stuff. And even if the show is actually fantastic, has great talent, has great music, how does that make it for you to criticize? Because there's this thing that obviously audiences, maybe with kids, are going to love it, but at the same time, are you losing the artistry? Are you still going to want to how would you highlight shows that are coming out that are more original? Things like that.
Well, that's a good question, and it's a good point, because you're right. Right now you have like two Broadways. One is the traditional with important new plays, and it's almost impossible for producers to bring them to Broadway, or important new musicals. There are several the last few years between Fun Home and Hamilton and Dear Evan Hansen and The Band's Visit. You know, they're four that I consider brilliant musicals, and they're totally unlike any musicals you've seen. So I think that that's important. But all of the families, you know, the SpongeBobs, you know, I find that I judge them based on, well, you know, I might not enjoy it myself, but there is an audience. Does it deliver to the audience what, you know, something worth their time? Mean Girls, for example, is not the most intellectual of shows, but I found that it did precisely what it's trying to do. And I praised it in that manner. It might not be my favorite show ever, but it certainly addresses its audience, and it does it well, and with humor and with style. In terms of old productions, things we've already seen, yes, some of them are retreads, and there's not so much to say. But this season we had, for example, 3 Tall Women, which is an old play, but it was, in this particular production, I think it's done even better than it was done originally. And the original was wonderful. So, you know, you can do a revival and bring more to it. Hello Dolly is popular entertainment, and that's all it intends to be. But that revival also was done in a way that enhanced the material, as opposed to some revivals where, oh, they're doing another streetcar, you know, it's like, who's in it this time? And you're not getting much more. So you're right, some of them are not challenging, but some of them are very much so. And Iceman Cometh right now also, again, it's, you know, it's well worthy of discussion and attention. And I only wish that it was priced so that people could get to see it. You know, and even with the commercialization of Broadway, you still do have some new works, like those musicals I mentioned last year, Doll's House, Part 2. Again, wonderful new theater. And there's a lot of that wonderful new theater off Broadway as well. And some of it does work its way. So you're correct in that some of it is retreads and not very interesting, but there are other things, and those we embrace. And also, just generally speaking, a revival is a revival if you've seen it before. But if you've never seen it or never read it, it can be as embracing as a new show.
I think that in many ways, Broadway at least has been the exact same way forever. I mean, all of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals are, you know, based on books or previous properties. So I don't think that's changed at all. Mean Girls is based on a movie that's based on a book, and all of that. So I think when it comes to me and the way that I approach those projects specifically, I approach them the same way that I would like a one man or one woman off of Broadway show. You know, it's still a group of people putting together art that they believe in. Some are doing it mostly for the money, but there's some artistry. I would say there's some artistry in everything. So, you know, for instance, like it always makes me really sad when I hear people dismiss SpongeBob, which was one of the most inventive, most creative shows I've ever seen on Broadway. And I mean, I go to over like almost 300 shows a year. So, but SpongeBob is, and the fact that people are dismissing it because it's about, you know, based on a cartoon, makes me pretty sad, because it's one of the most political shows on Broadway right now. It's talking about immigration, about, you know, the chaos that this administration is putting the whole world under. It talks about people being afraid of the other, about xenophobia, and it does it with this like DIY aesthetic that even if it's SpongeBob and even if it's Nickelodeon and even if they really just want your money, it's not the same as Frozen, for instance, which is pretty bad. That's like legitimately like a cash machine. Like they just want you to enter, buy your merch, sit, and then go home. So I approach everything the exact same way. I mean, we're all human, so sometimes we roll our eyes at things, but I always go into any show with, you know, as much of a clean slate and as much of trying to leave my bias outside as I can.
Sergio, do you have kind of that issue going on the other side?
Yeah. Can you still see me? Yeah. Yeah. There you go. I think I'll be a little more radical on this, based on my experience in Italy, and I would say also in Europe, generally speaking. I would say that to me, to my sensibility as a critic, as a worker, the most important thing is to build a conversation, as I said. But when I say conversation, I mean with the audience, but also with the artist. So I have the feeling that some of these commercial, because this is the term that the lady used, commercial stuff, they don't want to get in a conversation with critics, with criticism, with critical writing, by the way. So I'm not saying that I don't want to go and see a musical, because we do have musical, for example, or a lot of commercial stuff. I go and see them, but always I'm in search of something that builds a dialogue with me, or with, and especially with contemporary reality. Sometimes you go and see something very well produced, but it's a product. And I think that criticism nowadays in my country or in Europe is not really interested in evaluating a product, because, as we said before, we have publicity and we have a lot of tools and instruments that through the World Wide Web, first of all, they can self-produce, they think, and self-value themselves. So I have the feeling that they are not in need of my, not opinion, but not even my analysis. But I can say that I can go and try to find something that is interesting to analyze and to see from other points of view, as I said before. But generally speaking, I would say that this category of commercial stuff, it really changes. It very much depends on where you live and where you go and which kind of work and relationship you want to establish with them. But that's my opinion. That of course you can find something interesting and valuable to discuss. But I have the feeling that I need from the counterpart, the artist, same interest in dialogue. Otherwise, I feel I'm not paid, for example, so nobody pays me for doing that. So, you know, it's a triangle between me, spectators, and artists.
We only have a couple minutes left, or do we even?
I also, Francesca was one of the artists, but also then I want to ask Marco and Stefano, who they had a big hit at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and they're doing the show at 6 p.m. And so, what is if you've seen any difference between the criticism there and in Italy, you know, how you Yeah, you want to talk about
I
that. Marco wants to talk about
Okay. Okay. I don't want to ask something, but I want to say something. We talk about criticism, okay? But and you talk about the dialogue with the audience. But I think that, like an artist, I have to ask to myself what I have to do with the audience. I want to have a talk with the audience, and so I have to hear the audience, or I have to do what I want to do. So if I have to meet the audience, I don't know how is it, because I see Times Square, there's a lot of show. I know Mean Girls, the movie, I don't know how is the show Mean Girls. But I want to pleasure the audience, or I want to give a message to the audience. I want to do entertainment, or I want to improve the society. I have to choose, okay? And if I do the both things, I do stand up to entertain the audience, and I do a show about lesbian during the fascism, because I want to give a message. You talk about the SpongeBob. It's talk about the difference, the people that are scared, you know. And you talk about Mean Girls that could be a I don't know. I critique about the society, the girls that fight himself, the queen bee. And so, what is the message? An entertainment, or I want to make a culture? But I must ask, like an artist, what I have to do and what I want to do. I prefer to do both. I want to entertain the people, because in Italy, the people need to laugh. We have a bad political situation. Very bad political situation.
Well, yes. Let's not talk about politics, otherwise this will never end.
But I do civil theater, but I do entertainment theater. But I try to unite both.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but I think that the artist must ask what you want to do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You,
I mean, the man himself,
and
the
Marco,
great Bertolt
yes,
Brecht,
Marco.
always said that above all, the theater must entertain.
Hi, I live and work in Italy. I'm Italian, half English, and we brought a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year. No, it's interesting what Sergio was saying about this dialogue with the artists, which I have a double feeling about, because I don't know if there should be a dialogue with a critic. I always see this Italian, very small Italian theatre community thanking the critic, you know, and I just think, I don't know, I don't agree with that. And I also would like to encourage the Italian critics to be a bit less intellectual. I mean, sometimes they're really well-written pieces, and I enjoy reading them really very much. But at the end, I don't know what the show's about. I don't understand if they're good acting. I don't understand, you know, this is in general. I'm not talking about you, Sergio, obviously, but
No. Fine.
You know what I mean. I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Whilst when we went to Edinburgh, it was just like, oh, great acting, wonderful writing, or bad acting, you know, bad. Yeah, they said we were really good, so, by the way. But it was very straightforward, and I think I got, as an audience, the information I need to go and see a show or not. I think Americans and British critics are very straightforward that way, and I enjoy that. Whilst Italians are very, and I put this in the broader sense, I mean, also actors are very intellectual. We're all very intellectual. We're all very cultured, and we bring that to everything we do. And as Francesca was saying, you have to make a choice. I mean, I like to entertain, so it's like, you know, but I totally agree. You need to know what you're doing. But sometimes the head gets in the way. in Italy. That's for sure.
I guess
and
I would
and I
just-
speak for actors as well as critics.
I would
This is just a thought.
Try to complicate that in the sense that because we're talking about, I brought this up earlier. I think power has been diffused out of the hands of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal critics, like whoever is important. Even Time Out doesn't have a critic anymore. That power is now diffused, and if it's only about what's good, what's bad, what's the difference between criticism and marketing?
Yeah. Okay.
There's no.
Yeah, you
Well, you got
Sergio.
I totally. The only thing is that I'm not sure that you can do the comparison with such an environment as the Edinburgh Folk Festival. I've been there many times, and things are really different than any other situation in Europe. Because, as he said just now, it's about talking straightforward to the artist and to the audience too, because the audience needs to understand what's going on at Carnival in Edinburgh. So I understand what you mean, and I agree with you. And I'm one of them sometimes. I find myself, going too intellectual and trying to build up the whole structure of the world around a very tiny show. But I think that the example brought up, it's not completely fair towards
Sergio. Mine was a thought, and mine is like food for thought for all of us, because I think it's an invent. We have to invent a way of being, and apart from the fringe, London and New York are not fringe, and I have the same opinion. So.
I'd love to, because we're running a few minutes over, just give these gentlemen on stage a couple minutes. It was kind of got away a little bit. Let you guys have some closing thoughts on what's been talked about so far.
I would just say that with what he was saying right now,
Marco,
like basically those are consumer reports, and that's kind of like what Amazon does and why the internet's good, because there everyone can say the acting was good, the acting was bad. I think the job of a critic is to go past that. It's not your job to sell the show. It's your job to engage the audience with aspects of the show that maybe they wouldn't have thought about. Yeah. So I'm all against consumer reports in criticism. Like, I don't like ratings. I don't like thumbs up, down, stars, letters. No, like it should be dialogue. It shouldn't be grading.
I would like, I would like also to ask for a final thought to everyone. Talking about communities and talking about yes, Fabio.
I would like if someone translate me, because my English is very.
Ok, e prima che, perché siamo.
Un attimino solo. Si parlava di cosa ci aspettiamo dalla critica, no? In qualche modo. Io credo che in Italia la critica, soprattutto dopo Quadri, non si sia ricostituita una scuola di critici, soprattutto.
So in Italy, there's not a school of criticism. After there was a big journalist who died, basically. So after him, there's not really a school for criticism. So many times they just do a sum up of the show.
C'è una critica, e soprattutto spesso funzionano gli uffici stampa, quelli più forti portano i critici. Di quale Italia parliamo? In Sardegna, in Calabria, dove succedono tante, per esempio, pensiamo adesso a degli spettacoli che hanno vinto un sacco di premi, però se non si spostano, i critici non si spostano nelle periferie.
Yes. So the big something similar is happening here, but is that Italy is very big. So there are the main cities, and there are many smaller cities, but still important, where a lot of things are happening. But the national press, usually they don't go, because this is in another city or in another region.
I critici mi aspetterei libertà. Non sono liberi, spesso i critici non sono liberi, hanno un sacco sono piccole comunità che si spostano a seconda di questi piccoli feudi che gestiscono i teatri in maniera professionale e oligarchica.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to translate completely, but the thing is saying he would like for critics to be free to do what they want or what they like, instead of have to follow certain kind of group that they belong to, and also he was saying many times is depend on the PR you have, because a very powerful PR can bring powerful journalists or so it's more is not so much about the critic, is about everything else. So he would like the critics to be free. And so my final thought, and then we'll go upstairs so we can continue chatting in front of some drinks and food. Is Sergio, I'm sorry.
Lucky you.
You'll be. We can bring you upstairs and you can watch us do it. My final question is, first of all, how free you are in what you do. Thinking of what Fabio said. Fabio and Francesca, they both have shows in the festival. They are the LGBTQ category, and they're going to do the shows tomorrow at Bernie Hall Center on the Upper West Side, because the festival going in all 5 boroughs. We travel, we tour New York. So, first of all, are you free? Siete liberi di fare, di scrivere di quello che volete? Are you free of reviewing, talk about everything that you want? And also, if there is a community that you haven't reached out to, which one it is, and why you would like to reach out to that community, why you think is important. So, okay, you understood. Okay.
Well,
just Sergio, start. So yeah.
Sorry, I can't remember the name of the guy who posed the question now, but he posed a very specific question about Italy.
Fabio.
And it's and it's a very
Okay, let's go because we are late. So finish, Sergio. A short answer.
Very shortly, it's a huge question, the one he posed, and I'm very attached to an idea of freedom of criticism, freedom of speech. As I said, I'm a journalist, so I should be attached to this. And I would say that very briefly, that on one hand, the internet and the online criticism should guarantee this, that nobody pays you, as we said, so you should be free to write and go wherever you want and write whatever you want. But the thing is that the past that you recall, Franco Quadri era, Italy was a completely different country, and Franco Quadri, as we know, it was this very powerful critic, and he was probably free, but he caused to many other people to lose their freedom to go around, because what he said, when he said yes, now we're still dealing with the people he said yes to, and when he said no, nobody ever heard about him anymore.
Yes. No.
Okay, let me just finish.
Closing arguments. We need to.
We should go against any lobby of kind you brought up, and I'm sure that sometimes one of the biggest problems the critics have is to find money to get around. First of all, I mean, we invented a website from scratch, and now we are able to pay ourselves our trips or here and there. Sometimes I would say that also press officers and publicists, there are some good and some bad. So some of them are able to build around the show, around the festival, a good narrative, and it gets interesting because it has something to say, something that it's not really common in that way. But I quite agree with you. It's just that
thank you. The Italians tend to talk. Grazie, Sergio. Stay there. Yeah. So we say thank you to Sergio Gatto from Italy, and we'll connect all of you so you can be in touch, and in the future.
Thank you.
Just say yes.
Okay, to answer Fabio's question, I'm free, and I think what keeps me free is that I'm always honest. I only have one rule when I'm writing, and it's that I would never write. I always tell myself, don't write anything you wouldn't tell to the person to their face. So that keeps me pretty honest and that keeps me pretty free. In terms of audiences that I wish I could reach out to, I'm pretty confident. I've written probably one of the only theater reviews in Spanish in New York history. So I want to reach out to Latinx people and Hispanic people and let them know that, hey, theater's also for you. And the last thing that I want to say is, please go read criticism, find critics outside the papers, listen to podcasts, and look for new media, which is not very new because it's radio and TV basically. But look for new media, and please, 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 when you disagree with a critic, let them know. Let them know on Twitter and put it on Facebook and start your own conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank you for having this discussion.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the opportunity to sit here with Jose and Robert and Sergio. And I'd also like to thank you all for coming and listening to what we have to say. It's an interesting point that you make because in terms of being free to write what you want to write. For a number of years I worked for Variety, which is a publication, and indeed I had to write what I was assigned to write and only what I was assigned to write, and I would turn in my copy and sometimes it would be edited. A lot of these publications do survive on advertising and on relationships with the theatrical productions, so they do in cases have a reason for kind of not making you not free, but overseeing what you're doing. And one of the great things about writing on the internet and writing for our own groups that we form ourselves is that we are totally free to cover what we wish to cover, although we can't really cover just what we wish to cover. We need to cover what's important to cover, because that's where you find things which you didn't, it's the shows that you don't expect anything from that turn out to be wonderful. That's really what makes theater exciting. And I think that I've covered the question.
And the community, which audience you want to reach out?
Which audience? Well, my feeling, I don't like everything I see, certainly, and I don't know that I would agree with any critic who did. But when I see, well, really.
Absolutely.
But when you see something that you're excited about and you're enthusiastic about, that's what you want to, that's the message you want to get to the audience. And if I can get to you and say, listen, this might not sound like something you like, but it's really important, go see this play. That's really what, I'm not enthusiastic when I don't like it, but it's the things that you find that are so worthwhile. You want to get people, and whether they're your usual readers or people who've never read you or people who just see a quote on the side of the theater, whatever it is that gets them in, it doesn't matter whether they're your audience per se. It's if you can say, this is worth your attention and get other people excited about the shows. That's what I'm interested in.
And the two questions, are you free? I'm absolutely free. I can go whatever I want to see. The only constraint I guess I have is that I'm one person. I have a correspondent who works with me, but she can only see a certain number of shows as well. And so it's kind of constricted by what I hear about. So what press agents get to me, and then also by my own editorializing and biases, just in terms of what I see and say, that looks good to me, or that looks interesting to me, or that looks worthwhile to me, versus I'm not interested in that. So that is definitely a roadblock to go see a show being all that it could be. But for now, I'm just one guy who goes to see shows and then talks about them. And who aren't I reaching? I guess my constituency, and this is really important to me, my constituency is independent theater. And that's why I'm going to give a shameless plug, the League of Independent Theater. If you go to or are involved in independent theater in any way in New York City, please join the League of Independent Theater. Membership is free. And part of what I want Go See a Show to do, and what the League of Independent Theater is actively trying to do, is expand what that community means. Everyone who's making theater in this town. I don't care where you're from, what borough you're from, or what your community was that's not independent theater. We want independent theater to overlap with all of those communities. So I guess that's the group that I want to reach, that because I'm terrible at marketing and business, I'm not getting out enough. So if anyone wants to help me with that, please please, I will graciously accept your help. Thank you again to Laura, to Jose, Sergio, and Steven. I'm so bad with names. I was so worried I was going to get it wrong. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you so much. And Sergio, now we are going and enjoying the food, the Mamma Rita.
Raise the glass for me.
And thank you. Before we go upstairs, I really want to thank the League of Independent Theatre. I'm part of it. We work together, and they're fantastic. So, for even if you're not a New Yorker, you can also join for free. And what they do, which is very important also to do in Italy, is they advocate for theater. They have been able to find to create a program where you have rehearsal space almost for free for companies, and you have just to apply, and they give you 1 month of rehearsal space for basically free. You cover only the insurance. Yeah. And I did, and we were in the basement of the New York Times. We had a place that's so big. Actually, we wanted to create something different because we were using only little, and also they kind of worked towards changing the codes for equity, the showcase.
We worked with equity,
showcase.
yeah, to change the showcase code, as well as we are a 501c6 business league, which means that we can endorse political candidates. So we do get involved in local elections and a little bit on statewide this year too.
Yeah, and so this is I'm going to say it in Italian for the Italian guest. Una delle cose più importanti che fanno, e siamo in pochi, è un piccolo gruppo, ma quello che fanno è che quando c'è un'elezione politica fanno un panel con i candidati, gli chiedono cosa faranno per i teatri indipendenti, e il candidato che viene votato da tutti i membri del teatro, della Lega dei Teatri Indipendenti, viene sostenuto dalla Lega, e se viene eletto noi andiamo e diciamo adesso fai quello che hai detto.
E che hanno sostenuto loro?
Questa è su New York City, non lo sapete, però per dirvi è una cosa che è proprio diretta alle persone che poi andranno nei municipi, addirittura non solo al comune, ma proprio nei municipi, anche nelle piccole aree, per potergli dire ok, adesso noi ti abbiamo aiutato, adesso però fai quello che hai promesso.
Tutto questo lo fa la Lega?
Cosa?
La Lega?
Tutto questo lo fa la Lega proprio?
The League of Independent Theatre, non la Lega. La Lega is a political party in Italy and we don't want to talk about it.
So join us, it's litny.org, and as an individual you can join, as well as if you have a company or a performing space, please sign up, everybody, and tell all your friends.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you upstairs. Thank you. Thank you for coming back slowly. I want to first introduce, so I'm going to say the right name, Kyle Wright from the Schubert Organization. He's going to give a presentation about a new program. I don't know if you know about Gala Pro. Just a little bit. It's a very interesting app that is happening, and now it's on Broadway. But Kyle, you're better than me in explaining this. Please come and enjoy this presentation, and then we'll start talking with Dario D'Ambrosi as well, Meredith Gansman, about accessibility in theater making.
Fabulous. Do we have the screen up? I think we're working on that. Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm with the Schubert Organization. For those that don't know, Schubert is a group that owns a lot of real estate here in New York. We own 17 Broadway theaters and 6 off-Broadway theaters in New York City. We also own Telecharge, which is a big ticketing brand through which you buy tickets, and a variety of other kind of entertainment-related businesses in this space. Why I'm here talking to you today is what I do for the Schubert Organization is run our technology incubator. So we work with startup companies in the arts and provide them theaters to test in, sometimes office space, sometimes a ticketing system to work with, whatever it is they need to prove out the product that they're trying to design and provide them the resources they need to really scale that or understand what that looks like on scale. And then on occasion, we will invest in the company or we will distribute them in the United States. So a big part of our organization is charitable giving. So we give away about $35 million, or this year, $30 million a year in general operational funds to nonprofit theaters across the country. And so the goal of that foundational aspect of our business is to ensure the survival of the theater and dance as an art form in the United States. So this all kind of intertwines together, where a lot of the technologies that we work with and try to nurture, we see as being vital to the ongoing success and health of live performing arts in the United States, and to some extent overseas as well. So GalaPro. Essentially, GalaPro is an app that is based in Tel Aviv, Israel, and that is currently implemented across all of Broadway. And what this app does, which is both iOS, Apple, and Android, Google, respectively, is, for those that don't know, is essentially it provides closed captioning for the deaf and hard of hearing in real time in an app. It provides audio description. For those that don't know what that is, audio description is the service that you provide people who have vision loss and describes the action on stage. So rather than being an ongoing dialogue of what I'm saying, audio description will say Kyle walks across the stage, Kyle sits down in a chair, because someone who can't see can hear the dialogue but can't see the action. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. So it provides those two services, and most recently language translations as well, word for word subtitles that are synced using vocal recognition with what's happening on stage, so it's in real time. Now, a lot of times I get this reaction about bringing phones into the theater. So we're going to talk about the process we went through, because it is scary to think about utilizing your phone in a live theatrical environment when so much of our time as theater owners and directors and actors and stage managers and ushers is spent yelling at people for having their phones out. So why did we go this route? And what made us get here to where we are today? And I should lead with saying every Broadway theater, every performance, every seat, both commercial and nonprofit, beginning June 1st, in a few short weeks, will be providing on-demand captioning for the hard of hearing, audio description for the low vision at every performance, beginning 3 to 4 weeks after opening, because we have to wait for that script to be frozen. But that's across the board. Lincoln Center, Drew Jansen, every theater you go to on Broadway will have these services available, just so everyone knows. So why did we get to this point? Obviously, legal action here in the United States is a big piece of that. For those that don't know, there were multiple lawsuits that happened this year on Broadway, catered towards not providing on-demand captioning and on-demand audio description. And what I mean by on-demand, to be clear for those that don't know, that means you buy a ticket without telling anybody that you have hearing loss. You show up at the theater and you say, I need captioning. That is on-demand, and that is what the law requires now. This has shifted quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years. It was a seismic shift, or a big shift, last year when the movie theaters in the United States were all forced to provide on-demand closed captioning at every screening. So we saw that happening, and we're like, okay, well, this is a thing we're going to have to think about relatively quickly as part of the ADA, and we can't use the excuse that it's too expensive anymore, because GalaPro, for example, costs $300 per running week. That's it. And it's free for the user to use. So we're like, okay, so we got to find a solution here. But rather than make it all about legal issues, there was also an issue I like to call the Grandma Millie effect. This is my grandmother. Isn't she cute? She's on the right. My mother's on the left. She'd kill me if she knew I had to differentiate, but whatever, it's fine. So my grandma's 83. She likes to do whitewater rafting. She likes to go on extravagant vacations. She's very cool. But the reality about my grandma is that she introduced me to theater, right? So she brought me when I was 8 years old. And ever since then, I couldn't get out, and I've been trapped my whole life, and here I am. So I blame my grandmother. But at any rate, I think the important thing to think about is that at least here in the US, we know that intergenerational attendance is how you introduce, the most important way of introducing new audiences to theater, to dance, to symphony, to opera. 12-year-olds aren't just going to go on their own, but they will go with their oftentimes grandparent because they have that extra time. So we want to make sure is that we can continue to involve and invest in this intergenerational component. A couple of numbers: 35% of people in the United States over the age of 65 have hearing loss, period. 1 in 3. Of that group, only 1 in 10 actually are diagnosed and admit they have hearing loss and seek help. So what does that mean for our theaters? In just Schubert theaters alone, we have 600,000 people per year sitting in our seats that have hearing loss. And we're doing, up till now, we've done nothing for them really. We've had one scheduled performance per year, one open caption performance per year, and that was it. And a sign language performance. And a question I often get is, well, what about sign language, which is still very important, but it's also important to understand that of the deaf population, or people on the hearing loss spectrum, between 10 and 15% of that population sign. So to provide sign language at every performance is only to actually provide services for 15% of the deaf population. So that's an important number to realize. Additionally, as we're thinking about the impact and how we could actually make a favorable change with this program, or a program like this, was the fact that we have 1.3 million people per year come into our theaters, sit in our seats from non-Anglophone countries. And I'm mostly including, not including France or Germany in this, or Italy even for that matter, countries that often have people who speak English. This is countries like China, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, where we see a lot of attendance for people who really don't speak English. And we haven't been providing language translations at all. So this is another really big opportunity for us. So out of this came what we call our audience services program. Again, this is at every single one of our theaters, every performance from every seat. We provide closed captioning, we provide assistive listening, which is the infrared hearing. So you put the headset on and it broadcasts what's happening so you can hear better. Audio description for the blind and low vision, and language translations, depending on the show. We choose the languages based on where we're seeing people buy tickets. So certain shows like Phantom of the Opera cater heavily to China and Japan. So simplified Chinese and Japanese are our main languages there. Other shows like Mamma Mia, when it was still playing, catered much more largely to the European market. So we would think about those, so that's how we consider those. So how did we get here? It was a lot of experimentation, a lot of crazy effort, and a lot of mistakes. But we got there. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes here and explain to you the process by which we arrived at the GalaPro app and how we got to where we are today. So, yep. Yeah, if you want to download it, you can. The app is GALAPRO. You can download it on the GalaPro. You can download it on the iOS or Android store, either way, iTunes or Google Play. So essentially, we knew we needed to have a solution that would be scalable, that we could provide to people who are experiencing hearing and vision loss and language translation needs. And we knew that we didn't have space in our small theaters, I don't know who's been in Broadway theaters, but they're tiny, to store thousands of devices. So we knew we needed to do something to utilize this computer in our pocket, right, to make sure that we had that available. So we had immediately kind of a fork in the road. One direction was a mobile website solution. So Globe Titles is something you may have heard of, that's mobile web, or GalaPro, which was an app. The difference between mobile web and app, the biggest one, is in an app, you can control the experience. And what I mean by that is you can make sure that it's all black backgrounds. You can make sure that it's light gray text or red text so it doesn't glare. You can ensure that the menus don't flash bright white. You can make sure that the phone has to be on airplane mode and has to be on do not disturb mode and has to be connected to a specific network that doesn't have outside internet. And that's what we decided on. And as a result of that, when you turn the GalaPro app on in a theater, you cannot get outside text messages, you cannot get phone calls, you cannot get FaceTimes, you cannot get emails, you cannot get alerts. It is purely for that purpose because we require all those things. So how we got there is we started off, truthfully, by just doing a proof of concept in a boardroom where I took all of my vice presidents who were accusing me of destroying theater and said, here, look, it's not that bad. And they looked, and it wasn't that bad. So I repeated that probably 12 times with anybody who wanted to scream at me. I got screamed at a lot. And then people were like, oh, it's not that bad. I'm like, I know, it's not that bad. So we got through that process. And then our board decided we should do a more formal test, a beta test, in a theater. So we went to one of our off-Broadway venues where Avenue Q is playing. We own New World Stages. And we invited the cast of Spring Awakening at the time to come and test with us, and all of our executives, and Beth Prevor from Hands On, and Lisa Carling from TDF, and really invited a lot of the community members from HLAA and some of the advocacy groups to come test this with us. So we did it in a live theater with ushers, with audiences, and learned some things. We made a few tweaks, and then we said, now it's time for the big leagues. Let's go for a full pilot program. So we launched in 4 theaters. This was fall of last year. 4 Broadway theaters, 8 shows a week for 3 months.
And let me translate a little bit if you, per quelli che non capiscono tutto quanto. Questa app è stata costruita, è stata sperimentata prima con coloro che lavorano con persone con disabilità. Hands On è un'associazione che lavora con deaf.
Hearing Loss Association of America.
Praticamente sì, coloro che non ci sentono, dal poco al tantissimo al completamente sordo. E prima l'hanno sperimentata così, poi hanno fatto 3 months.
3 months, 4 theaters.
Per 3 mesi 4 teatri di Broadway, dove hanno fatto un programma pilota, diciamo, per vedere come funzionava questa application.
And part of that test, which she just mentioned, was to bring in large focus groups. So we brought in groups of 40 and 50 people that would all sit in the theater together and use the app in one section. So we could actually get a sense of the impact of a lot of people using this in a real theater environment. So we would alert the actors, we would alert the stage managers, we'd alert the conductors and our ushers, and I would be there with $1,000 worth of gift cards in case people got mad at me. So interestingly, what happened in that process is we got 2 big pieces of feedback from the audience members sitting around our focus group. So the people that weren't using the app, right? The 2 things they said were, most people recognized and said, oh, that looks like people are they hard of hearing? It looks like captioning. That's great. Thank you for doing that. That's important. More often than not, this happened at intermission. People came up to me and said, can I use that? I can't understand a word they're saying. So this is true to this day, actually, as we've rolled this out, that we see in our numbers, we have a huge spike at intermission in users. Because as people see that it's available, they want to use it themselves. And the reason we fell in love with this app as a part of this focus group was that people really liked that they could be discreet. They didn't have to go to someone and ask for a device or give over their ID or anything like that. They could just download it and use it at their seat, and it was totally fine. So we did that pilot program. We used that focus group, made a lot of improvements, and then we developed from that focus group, which is already kind of starting to happen, but we formalized an advisory committee made up of 10 people that really represent the large advocacy groups in the US for hearing loss. We did the same thing for vision loss. Hearing Loss Association of America, National Association for the Deaf is now starting to partner with us. Association for Late Deafened Adults, Theater Development Fund, Hands On. And we really brought these people together and said, look, we need your help. Let's figure out how we can make this the best thing it can be. So we learned 5 key things in this whole process that we then took and applied to create the app that you see today. We're going to go through those really quickly. So 5 things. Number 1, we're all in this together. We found out very early on that the most important thing we could do was going to be to bring together the population that we were serving. And Jerry Bergman, who's on our advisory committee, which was brought together for that purpose, said to me, never do for us without us. Never do for us without us. Meaning, don't just create a solution and say, here, look what we did for you, isn't it great? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to meet the needs. So we were very conscious of bringing together the people that we were trying to serve and getting their feedback at every step of the way. And it was difficult, and we got a lot of really harsh feedback, a lot of good feedback, but it was all very useful, and we learned a lot to make something that really worked for us.
And let me just translate it very briefly, because it's important, è importante per dopo. Cioè, praticamente una delle cose importanti, ci sono 5 fattori importanti nel fare questa application. Uno è che l'hanno creata insieme a coloro che hanno i problemi. Quindi non è una cosa che fatta ve la diamo. No, sono andati, hanno praticamente insieme a queste associazioni che si occupano di chi ha i problemi, hanno lavorato su questa cosa, perché è importante mai fare una cosa per noi senza di noi.
Yeah. So the second big thing we learned, first big thing, make sure you involve everyone. Second big thing, because if you're going to spend the money and the time, you want to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. Second thing, as we thought about how we utilize the computers in our pocket to do this, 2 things emerged here. One was, if you're going to create a service for people, and the goal of that service is to make sure that everyone can come together and enjoy this piece of art, then you need to design the program so that everyone can do it. A lot of times we think, oh, we have 10 devices on hand. That's great. That's all we'll ever get. And then if you're the 11th person who walks up to the booth, sorry, no devices left. Guess you can't enjoy the show. That's not accessibility. That's not on demand. You're lying to yourself if you think it is. That's what we had to come to the grips with. Real accessibility means you can have a group of 100 people come from my grandma's retirement community that can't hear, and they can all enjoy it together, and we can facilitate that, right? So that means we do have devices on hand. We have specific, they're called iCaptions, and they're purpose-built for this purpose. 10 of those, and then we have several dozen small, cheap Android devices on hand in specific theaters that we know we're going to get requests for. The important thing there is the purpose-built machinery costs 6 or 7 times more than an Android device does. We're talking about $200 versus $50 or so. That's $40 if buying in bulk. So it's very important that we're able to scale. The second thing is, which we've had to deal with, is if we're going to use people's phones, we need to make sure that we're working with the version they're working in, right? Because I never update my version. I'm a great tester for this product. I act like my grandmother. It's fabulous. Everyone hates me. So essentially, we regression test everything back as many versions as you can, like way more than anyone else does for that purpose. So make sure you have enough for everybody, and make sure if you're going to use this phone that the app, which it does, there was a learning lesson, you test as many versions as you can. Another big learning lesson.
E per cui far sì che tutti abbiano il mezzo per poter vedere questi sopratitoli o per poter usare questa application, per cui hanno un numero di telefoni anche dentro al teatro, ma è il fatto che uno può usare il proprio è la chiave, perché se no diventa che magari ce ne hanno 100 e arrivano 150 persone e 50 persone rimangono senza.
Yeah. Next thing that we learned was you need to find a way to not let this happen, right? Or you're going to have Patti LuPone screaming at you. So how do we make sure that we create an app that people can use, but they can't use as an excuse to do wrong thing, to like film or be on the phone or whatever? And so what we took that to mean in the design aspect of the app, as I said before, the phone has to be on airplane mode. The phone has to be on do not disturb mode. The phone has to be connected to a Wi-Fi network with no internet, meaning you can't actually browse any sites. And Google phones have to be on do not disturb mode. Apple is a real pain in the ass, and so we're still trying to figure that out. But anyway, we request that you turn it on do not disturb. But effectively what we've done is we've created this app that when it's in use cannot be disturbed and cannot disturb the people around you. Because the last thing you want to do is be holding it, using it, and all of a sudden something goes off and you look terrible, right? We don't want that.
Per cui non deve disturbare la persona che sta accanto a voi.
Yeah. Which leads into the next thing we learned, which was very important, which is that at their core, a lot of people are rule followers. You're wondering where this is going. Rule followers. See? At their core, a lot of people are rule followers. And what I mean by that is, what we learned from our focus groups and from our advisory committee is that the populations that need to use captioning and that need to use audio description are very fearful of creating a disturbance and being embarrassed, rightfully so. They really want to make sure that they can enjoy it, and that's important, but they also want to make sure that in the process of enjoying it, they don't feel like an outsider. That's not the point of all of this, right? The point of all this is that we sit next to someone who is not like us, who doesn't come from a similar background, and we share a story. That's at its core what theater is, in my mind. Otherwise, just watch Netflix, truthfully. So if you're not enjoying the part of being with people, why go sit in a theater in an uncomfortable seat and be hot and sweaty or cold and freezing, okay? So the important thing is every time we train an usher member, every time we train a house manager, every time we talk to a cast, in our playbill inserts, in our announcements from stage, we spend a lot of time and energy formulating our vocabulary to say the following in as many words. If you need to, please turn off your phones, unless you are using it to enjoy the show because you have hearing loss or vision loss. If you see someone around you using their phone for this purpose, it's okay. We agree with this. We encourage it. Please don't be an asshole, okay? So, because we want to make sure that helps our patrons feel like we've got their back, right? It makes them feel like they are supported, that they're not going to get yelled at. And then we have to go in weekly and train our ushers not to actually, physically harm someone with a phone out, because that's their natural inclination, okay? And in the next version of the app, we ask people to tell us where they're sitting so that an usher can see that this person is obviously, we know seat N101 is using Galapro, seat N105 is a jerk who's videoing the show. Scream at the jerk, don't scream at Galapro, right? That's the thing. So that's we learned, that you got to plan for the rule followers.
Per cui avere delle regole, quello che stanno facendo, stanno anche insegnando alle mascherine, dicendo alle mascherine: se vedete qualcuno col telefono non è detto che stia facendo il video o l'audio dello show o stia vedendo i messaggi. Importante il video e l'audio dello show, che non si può fare. E per cui la prossima versione di questa application avrà addirittura il numero delle poltrone, per cui se tu nella fila 1 posto numero 3 hai questa app, la mascherina lo può vedere e sa che non deve urlare, perché, cioè non deve andare lì e dire smettila col cellulare, perché sa che sta usando l'application, perché non ci sente o non ci vede.
And then building on that idea of...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that we need to...
We're almost there.
Yes,
I got one more slide. Building on that idea that the whole purpose of this is to make sure that you are enjoying the show with everyone else. We learned that one of the most important things we could do is make sure that the captions that you're seeing on your phone are in sync with what's happening on stage. Oh, God, I know. It's the last slide. I couldn't help myself. There we go. We're alive. But this is serious, because at the end of the day, you don't want to laugh before everyone else, right? You don't want to ruin the joke for people sitting around you. You don't want to laugh after everyone else. You want to laugh with everyone else. Same thing with crying, same thing with all the emotions. So what we did and what we learned and really spent a lot of time and money on was making sure that we are using a proprietary vocal recognition algorithm to sync what the actors are saying on stage with what you're seeing on your phone. If the actors stop, it stops. If they skip 20 pages, which of course they never would, but if they did, it skips with them, right? Or backwards. And a great example of this, John Leguizamo, Latin History for Morons, changed the performance with each audience. And he would move sections, and this moved with him with the Spanish translations. So that was I think we're very important and very proud of with the app, and the last kind of big thing we learned.
And this is something, è qualcosa che mi fa impazzire da attrice, as an actress point of view, I find it fantastic, è che riconosce la voce, l'application, per cui va in sincrono con l'attore, per cui se l'attore cosa che dice lui non succede mai, ma va avanti di 20 pagine, l'application va avanti con l'attore. Se l'attore torna indietro, l'application torna indietro, per cui riconosce l'attore e si sincronizza con la voce dell'attore. And you had to train actors as well.
Exactly.
E hanno dovuto farlo capire anche agli attori. Un po' perché diceva che gli attori erano così, because they were upset that people were looking
Could
at
see if they made a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, and also because certo, of course, they can see that
which they never do, right?
Yes, vedevano che facevano degli errori, cose. But we do the festival is super titles, and we
And the other thing that we can do in the app, you can take input from what's called CART, C-A-R-T, which is like a live court reporter that types in real time, and that can also appear on the app as well for people that need that. So that's kind of the end. I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
No, but we're going to talk.
Okay,
so
perfect. I'll sit down then.
Thank you so much. This is and it's available. I don't know if it will ever be available in Italy, but
I think so. I mean, it's based in Tel Aviv. They're going internationally.
So it's really, I think, is a next step towards including audience. And now for the next panel, I want to ask Meredith Gansman, Pixel 11 digital multimedia journalist, to come, and Dario D'Ambrosi from Teatro Patologico to join us. Unfortunately, Nicomen Andersen couldn't attend. He just wrote me an email saying, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I'll give you the... So, one of the reason I really wanted to have this discussion, because it's the beginning of the discussion, also with the Italian artist and with someone who's really dedicating his life to bring, we will say, the mentally challenged. What do you call it?
Yes, ma c'è qualcuno che può tradurre, perché quando spiego il mio concetto mi piace veramente che la gente
ti ridiamo
capisca.
Carlotta per che è stata...
Tanto già mi conosce,
ti conosce
sa benissimo.
Aspetta, ti do questa sedia e io mi metto sul... non è un problema. Beh. So one of the reasons I wanted this panel is because in this moment, and Meredith wrote a wonderful article. I was trying to get if it's printed or not. I don't know. It has been printed. She wrote about inclusion. So in America, what I see right now, at least in New York, there is a tentative of inclusion, but still we don't have inclusion in the theater. And this was also why when I met Kyle, and I was like, wow, this is amazing, because you can include people who have problems in the theater, something that we don't know very often. And actually, many theaters here, they're not accessible. And I think in Italy, many theaters are not accessible, right? Molti teatri non sono accessibili in Italia. And it's something that, so people cannot go to the theater. There's nothing, they cannot go. And so to me it's a very vital discussion, because we need to get everyone to the theater by doing it and by enjoying it. So I want to start first to introduce you. I know most of you know Dario, but Dario just
sì, è molto veloce cosa, sì, yeah. Perché sennò veramente già è noioso il teatro, se lo facciamo ancora più noioso la gente proprio scappa. Allora io vorrei presentarmi, ma la mia è un'esperienza assolutamente atipica. Io non vengo dal mondo teatrale, non vengo dall'accademia, io vengo dalla malavita milanese. Tutti i miei compagni di infanzia erano Continanza, Clemente, Valanzasca, Musci, tutta gente che è morta. Gli unici che siamo rimasti vivi sono io e Renato Valanzasca. Gli americani non hanno la minima idea di chi possa essere Renato Valanzasca, ma è un personaggio che rimane in vita. E dalla malavita io passo a giocare al Milan, che era la mia vera passione, il calcio, perché il teatro mi ha sempre spaccato le palle in un modo spaventoso, mentre il calcio io penso che è una delle cose che mi emoziona ancora adesso. E dal calcio finisco dentro un ospedale psichiatrico e lì capisco che c'è un mondo assolutamente incredibile da poter raccontare, e come se non con il teatro poter raccontare questo mondo straordinario che era il manicomio. Non so se ti ricordi tutto.
Of course. So Dario comes from a background that is not traditional. It's not from the world of theater. It's not, he didn't go to an acting academy. He comes from Milan, and in fact grew up in kind of involved in the kind of Milanese crime world, and a lot of his friends growing up are not people who are alive anymore. And from there, he then went on to play for a soccer team. That was always his passion. And from there, ended up in a psychiatric hospital and realized what an incredible source of stories to be told that could be.
E lì dentro l'ospedale psichiatrico ho capito che c'erano delle storie assolutamente uniche, e ho cominciato a raccontare queste storie a teatro, e il primo spettacolo, grazie a Laura, l'ho presentato l'altra sera, e tutti non ci sono, ma qui c'è anche Manuela che si è occupata di tutto l'allestimento, Manuela Filiaci, e devo dire che da quell'esperienza poi ho sempre lavorato con i ragazzi malati di mente, e devo dire che questo è molto importante, che grazie a loro sono ancora nel teatro, perché se non fosse per loro io in un teatro non ci sarei mai più tornato, perché ripeto che è una delle cose che spacca i coglioni in un modo spaventoso. Io trovo il teatro al giorno d'oggi totalmente morto, cioè non c'è una rivoluzione, non c'è un senso non ci può essere futuro se non c'è sperimentazione, ma la sperimentazione ci deve essere con una base di percorso da poter raggiungere. Il teatro in questo momento non c'ha niente da raggiungere, mentre lavorando con i ragazzi schizofrenici, autistici e down ti danno un'emozione talmente forte, perché le loro pause non sono delle pause accademiche o, come diciamo noi, di pippe mentali, ma forse sono pause come le definisce George Bataille o Antonine Artaud, quel filo che c'è tra la vita e la morte, l'impossibile, cioè la loro patologia ti dà quel vuoto che tu spettatore lo vivi con una forte emozione, quel vuoto che l'attore chiama pausa è un spaccamento di coglioni che non fa altro che rallentare drammaturgicamente un'opera teatrale. Molto difficile da spiegare, però ti lascio.
Yeah, so back in the psychiatric hospital was where he started finding these stories that he then wanted to bring into the theater. And ever since, and actually the first result of that was the show that he presented the other day at the In Scena opening night. And in fact, since then, Dario has been working with especially young people with mental disabilities, and they are the reason that he is still in theater, because they are actually what he finds interesting about theater, not the theater that is traditionally the way that theater is. He doesn't think that really there's anything going on there. Not a lot of the revolution is not starting from there, and there's no genuine experimentation that has a goal in mind. Whereas he, I'm not going to be as eloquent as he was, but that thinking of a pause, which what we would think of as an actor taking a pause, as if something artificial or tied into some sort of preconceived thing. When it's young people he works with who may have schizophrenia, may be autistic, may have Down syndrome, that pause on stage is a life and death thing that has so much going on.
Ok, concludendo, sono felice che noi siamo stati il primo paese al mondo, e Laura lo sa molto bene che viene dal movimento radicale, a chiudere i manicomi, e sono orgoglioso che io non come Dario D'Ambrosi, ma io come italiano, siamo stati i primi al mondo a creare, a fondare questo primo corso universitario di teatro integrato delle emozioni. E perché dico questo? Perché spero che molto presto questo corso si possa allargare in tutti i paesi, perché se noi pensiamo che certi paesi come la Bulgaria, la Turchia, l'Iran, questi ragazzi li tengono ancora con le camicie di forza o sui letti di contenzione, noi gli stiamo offrendo un corso di laurea, ma non è una cosa patetica. Io sono convinto che non è una cosa patetica, ma lo è perché non fa bene a loro, fa bene alla società, ma fa bene al teatro, perché solamente loro potranno dare un cambiamento rivoluzionario al teatro e far veramente smuovere questa situazione mortale in cui il teatro si sta trovando in questo momento, ma il teatro mondiale, ma soprattutto quello americano, che è veramente a livello proprio di sottostrada.
And sure, no, Dario is very proud that he comes from the first country in the world, which was where the mental institutions were first closed down, and in fact that he has also been personally part of developing a college degree that is inclusive, devoted to teaching theater to people with disabilities. And he's, noting to think that there's still many countries where young people with disabilities are kept in straitjackets, and they're not, whereas he's created a whole college degree for them. And in fact, he never thinks of it as anything being done out of pity or anything like that, but in fact that these groups of people can be the life force that is actually reinvigorating theater, and that is going to provide a much needed influx of innovation and an inspiration into global theater.
And on that note, let's go to Meredith, where you wrote this article about inclusion. So on that note, what do you see that is happening right now in the theater scene, including these young people with, for Emma the Orphans was Down syndrome, but we have, and also a lot of plays are about disabilities.
Sure. I'm Meredith. I'll tell you about this show briefly that I saw a few months ago. It was called Amy and the Orphans, and it was at the Roundabout. And Amy at the Orphans is about 3 siblings, one of whom has Down syndrome, and these adult siblings coming together. And I saw this show, one of the actor who, the character who has Down syndrome is played by an actress, Jamie Brewer, who has Down syndrome. Learning more about the show, this was the first time off Broadway and in New York theater that an actor with Down syndrome starred in a leading part, probably any part in the play. And that really fascinated me to learn about this changing scene and this potentially changing scene and changing scope, because Laura, you're right, the subject of people with disabilities has not been untouched, but actually including actors in that storytelling is more of.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by that because there have been so many television and film projects that have included actors with Down syndrome or other disabilities. Jamie Brewer was on multiple seasons of American Horror Story, which was created by Ryan Murphy, and there was another actress. Ryan Murphy also created the show Glee. There was an actress on that show for multiple seasons with Down syndrome, but weren't seeing it in the theater. So why became the question. Theater also has never been a space that, although people with disabilities enjoy the art form and enjoy the arts in general, it wasn't a safe space for people with autism, for people with Down syndrome. Why is that, and how do you include this group of people, this audience, back into the theater? And looking at that history and that this changing sphere of theater in New York and going forward was a little bit of what I looked into for this article, and I spoke with a leader in the field, really. Gail Williamson is an agent out of LA, and she works with an agency called KMR, and she proudly goes by the title of the Hollywood maven of Down syndrome, who she's really, paved the path for actors with disabilities and with Down syndrome, and agencies having departments for this, for actors with different diversities, and how you work with actors, why the numbers are low, and how to change that. And there are a lot of different reasons behind that, but it's an interesting stage to see things changing in for the first time, really. Kyle spoke a lot about audiences and actors with hearing loss and or those that are deaf, and we have companies already such as Deaf West who have brought Broadway productions of musicals that have been mainly signed or in part signed. The production of Spring Awakening that Kyle mentioned starred actors who were deaf and signed, but not yet with other disabilities. And a couple of years ago, there was the Tony Award-winning play Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, about an actor, about a character who was autistic, and that really opened the world for audiences to see themselves represented on stage. The stage has always been a place where if you can see yourself and you can learn, then you can learn from people on the stage, and the people that were maybe once less familiar to you then become more accessible. So telling these people's stories and by people who have the disability themselves is hopefully where we'll see things changing. And Jamie was just nominated for multiple awards. She now becomes the first actor who was with Down syndrome who's nominated for a Drama Desk. She's also nominated for a Theatre World Award. We'll see if this production transfers to a bigger stage and we see it on Broadway next year. She'll then become the first actress on Broadway with Down syndrome. So I hope to see a broadening, so it's not such a unfriendly space for audience members and actors with disabilities.
Yeah, and my question now to Kyle is, so we include actors and people with disabilities, how difficult it is to adjust with the people with no disability, which is something that Dario has been working for forever, is how you act with a person with disability, because the first reaction is, I don't have it, so I'm not, it's not my problem. Right? Dario, la prima reazione non è il mio problema. O anche, and I have to say, we are talking here about Down syndrome, but he's working with schizophrenic, which is another thing, and is able to, you know, work. And I don't know if there is anyone working with schizophrenic as in the psychotic in the U.S. I have no idea.
So a couple of things.
Yeah.
One, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really important. I don't know if you're seeing a show tonight or not, but I sit on the board of an organization called CoLab, which is Creative Opportunities Without Limits and Boundaries, and we provide a creative outlet for people with developmental disabilities to perform and write theater. And our performances are tonight and tomorrow. So if you have time, Sarah and I can. It's 7:30.
There is the festival tonight and tomorrow.
So no,
but we can get we can have Dario going. Can we have Dario going to the show, guys? Yes.
We'll figure it out. We can get the June. I don't know when you're in town.
Yeah, but I think he's leaving tomorrow.
So regardless, I wanted you to know that I sit on the board of that. It's something that's very important to me also, and. In that facet, as opposed to the evil commercial theater world I'm in, in my day job, it's interesting because we have, it kind of ties a lot of what we're saying together here in our strategic plan and part of that organization. This year, we brought in our actors who are across the spectrum of non-neurotypical disorders, autism being one of them. There's a variety of people we work with. And we hire supporting teaching artists who do to get degrees in actually working with people in performing arts who have developmental disabilities. So that is something that exists here. It's not often publicized. But what we have learned is the importance of bringing those populations that we are working with, who are our actors, onto the board and onto the decision-making apparatus and getting their input and having them help us guide the direction of the organization. Because if you don't receive that input and you don't receive that guidance, they will always be neurotypical people saying either, oh, look, they can perform too, which is not good, or we think you should do this, which is also not good. It should be let us help facilitate a larger kind of movement forward in art and what that means, in the creation of theater and in the process. And the performance is fun too, but what we hear from our actors is the most important piece for them is the fact that they can get together with people who are not like them, like I spoke about earlier, and create something beautiful. And that process, and they have friends, and they have colleagues, and they have cohorts, and they learn to engage with each other in a space of trust across differing ability levels, as do the supporting artists who teach with them and perform alongside them. So that's a very interesting thing, and I think DJ Kurz, who's the executive director of Deaf West that you mentioned, he and I were talking last year. He came in for our Accessibility Summit, and what he brought up is it's not one thing that needs to be done, right? We all want, I think everyone agrees, we all want more stories being told and being told by people who those stories are about, right? But it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? So as we talked about it, everyone has a role to play in that. In commercial theater, which is not where a lot of experimentation is happening, that's true, but where we have scale, and a lot of people have the opportunity to experience live theater for the first time. Our role, in my opinion, is to make sure that everyone can have that experience and see the beauty of the art form. And if that inspires one child who is deaf and one child who's non-neurotypical to then go on and say, I want to write a play, then they write that play. And then we work towards having that produced and having that performed. But it's all connected. And I think for us, in the things that we can do because we own the venues, we don't produce the shows. Our biggest role right now is making sure that we can open our doors to whoever wants to see and be inspired and create, then perform, and then we have more stories being told. I think that's very important.
Yes. And I want to ask Dario, how do i tuoi studenti come lavorano, cosa riescono a fare, cioè dove li hai portati? oltre a recitare, a viaggiare, ma ora che imparano a fare, non so, scenografia, costume,
sì, assolutamente.
Se ci dai un esempio di un ragazzo, io li conosco, ma if you tell us one example of one of your young student or whatever you want to call, young friend, they do, what happened to them while they were working with you?
Allora, prima di tutto bisogna precisare che i miei studenti non sono solamente con la sindrome di Down, perché come diceva, quelli della sindrome di Down sono un amore, cioè li puoi dirigere, li puoi veramente far lavorare quasi come degli attori professionisti. Quelli con la sindrome di Down possono benissimo recitare, come disegnare, addirittura scrivere. C'è qualche ragazza che scrive delle cose. Il problema è quando lavori con gli autistici gravissimi, con gli schizofrenici, i psicotici, quelli, io ho ragazzi che addirittura riescono a strapparsi la pelle dalla faccia, hanno delle crisi molto violente, dei ragazzi che quando hanno delle crisi mi riempiono di botte. Io sono grande e grosso, ma non riesco a fermarli, mi spappolano nel vero senso della parola. Però devo dire che a ognuno di loro, qual è la nostra formula? La nostra formula è che insegniamo tutto all'inizio, Laura: recitazione, scenografia, costume, dance ability, musicoterapia, luci e allestimento anche. Perciò la bravura sta nel docente capire quel tipo di ragazzo con quella patologia dove può esprimersi, perché come dicevo anche l'altra sera, non puoi, se lui non è portato per il disegno, è inutile che stai lì, cioè lo fai diventare ancora più scemo, lo fai diventare ancora più matto, mentre è portato per il movimento, perché nel movimento lui ha questa esplosione della sua patologia, può attraverso il movimento fare questo tipo di terapia. Perciò il lavoro è molto peculiare, ma soprattutto noi andiamo contro la mentalità dei genitori e degli psichiatri, perché il genitore e lo psichiatra è angosciato dalla violenza che c'ha questo ragazzo, e allora gli si dà le medicine per poter stare tranquillo con il condominio, con il quartiere. Molti di loro distruggono parti di negozio. Invece noi utilizziamo degli esercizi teatrali per quel tipo di violenza, cioè gli dico: guarda, tu adesso sei inseguito dalla polizia perché hai appena fatto una rapina. Questo viene un po' anche dalla mia storia esperienziale, e lui incomincia: vai, dopo un percorso del genere ha come un senso di rilassamento, e tu gli chiedi: cosa è successo? Ho avuto paura. Perché hai avuto paura? Perché sono stato male. Perché stavi male? Perché la polizia mi stava inseguendo. Perché ti stava inseguendo? Perché ho fatto una rapina. Ma tu vuoi stare così male? No. E allora non devo fare la rapina. Ma tu sai gestire questo senso di dolore che hai avuto? E lui dice: forse adesso sì. Ecco, questo è il lavoro che dobbiamo fare. Come succede a noi? Vi è mai capitato di avere un malessere che non avete mai avuto prima? E qual è l'angoscia di come gestirlo? E la paura che ti ritorni questo malessere. E questo, noi lavoriamo con la loro parte, di dolore, con la loro parte di paura, con la loro solitudine, attraverso gli esercizi teatrali, ma anche attraverso i disegni, come ti ho detto l'altra sera, questo ragazzo autistico che ha fatto questo disegno della stazione della polizia, sottosopra attaccato una nuvola, uno Chagall stupendo. Ecco, cerchiamo in ognuno di loro di trovare la dimensione dove può riconoscere la propria patologia. La conosco, alzo la testa e vivo la vita insieme agli altri.
In so many words. No, please, of course.
Se non capisci, se non so bene l'inglese, per me è difficile e queste cose le puoi veramente, mi dispiace, mi piacerebbe far capire perfettamente allora il concetto, sì. No, per l'amor di Dio, non metto le donne di Carlotta.
Well, first of all, Dario wanted to point out he doesn't just work with students with Down syndrome, who can often actually be very easy to work with in the sense that they, are really into even drawing and writing and acting. He is often working with kids on the autism spectrum and with different psychosis and schizophrenia. And these are people who can be violent, who can claw their own face or beat him up on the size that he is, and he may not be able to, But he is really, in the beginning, what they do is they teach them a whole range of things. So from acting to movement to set design to lighting design to sound design. And really what he focuses on is finding the outlet that is most appropriate for each individual. So there's no point in trying to shove somebody into a skill or a box that they're just, maybe drawing something that they're just not, that's not where their aptitude is. And in fact, something in which his approach differs from a lot of these kids' parents and teachers is that they may be scared by the violence that is within these individuals and may try to suppress that so that, it's less kind of visible in society. Whereas what he has learned to do is to channel that, really tap into that, in fact, and use that to allow these kids to express themselves and to then allow them to, through the really vivid example that he kind of gave that I don't want to recreate, but to come to terms with what it is that they fear on a primal level, and that allows them to understand more about their condition and to channel this violence and into kind of creative energy. And he talked about an example he talked about the other night where there was an autistic student who drew a police station upside down attached to a cloud, and instead of saying, well, that's not how things are, that's not right, it's to embrace that as his unique point of view.
And the fact is to it's something that happens to all of us, that we feel fear or anxiety because it's something about new. We feel some pain that is new. We don't know how to deal with that, and to recognize that it's normal and to recognize it. So these kids, because again, usually it's like pills. So there is like a trying to. I think there's only because I think they're recording something. I know it's almost 3 o'clock, and one of the things that I tried to do, really, for me, these panels, this is the first year we're doing a conference, and it's really to give, I would say, food for thought. Thought, yeah, I said it right. Thought for no, food for thought. So just to start a conversation, and then, we can talk about this for weeks and months. But it's touching, and maybe next year we'll do a bigger conference, for sure. We always go bigger. So, yes, we have the articles of Meredith. But before we'll give this at the end, and grazie, Donna. And I just would like to ask you, what do you see that is possible to do? What do you would like to say to people? How is it possible to have more inclusion? And also to the audience, but also to the theater makers. How do you include more people? And the next panel is actually about crossing communities, which I think is really valid also, is how you cross communities and embrace, like Dario does. I was at Teatro Patologico in Rome. If you ever go to Rome, you should go. And they do everything, and they are so happy, and the parents are happy. Everyone is like, turning upside down something that usually is a problem into, it's happiness, it's life. So what do you think that we can, if you, let's say, leave a little seed to say, this is what we could do, in your opinion?
I'll try to touch on like 3 quick things. One of what theaters are already doing here, and I'm sure you can speak to even more, are what we call relaxed performances, where it focuses on audiences who have disabilities really being able to enjoy the production. And some of the elements are a little bit changed and relaxed, if you will. For example, the lights aren't brought all the way down. Some of the sound effects may not be as loud, and audiences with disabilities such as autism or those who are on the spectrum are allowed to do anything from move around during the production. It's sold mostly to to any audience member who wants to buy a ticket, and they're informed, but you're not confined, because the theater can be a very unfriendly space for people with different disabilities. You know, sit still, sit in the dark, don't move, not friendly for people who don't operate like that, and things can be changed. So relaxed performances are a really important space. Also, I mean, again, Gail Williamson is really a key to bringing in actors and then audiences for people with disabilities. You know, it's kind of giving these actors a chance and learning more about the culture that they come from. What I learned through speaking with Jamie Brewer and more about Amy and the Orphans, focusing on Down syndrome, but the idea of acting and characteristics in that way are really inherent to people with Down syndrome, and the Dr. Down, who is credited with defining the characteristics of people with Down syndrome, had a school in the UK for young people with Down syndrome, and there was always a theater involved in this school, because the idea of acting was really a part of what made them unique. And something that Gail said to me was, through people with Down syndrome experiencing lots of different characters as actors, they often find the person that's closest to themselves. So I see that as, you know, using the theater as a teaching tool makes the space more accessible for different audiences in that way.
Okay. Yes, because I know you have to wrap.
Oh, thank you. I have 3:30. I have to be somewhere, but that's okay. I totally agree with all of that. I think from a theater owner perspective, right? Not from a producer, not from a playwright, not from a performer or director, but from a theater owner and the very kind of crux of the commercial side of this business, right? Where we are tasked with making money and keeping our doors open and selling tickets and all those things that are a very vital part of this business that we all like to ignore and pretend like they don't exist. So what we can do, I think the first big thing is for us to identify the why behind it. Why are we doing this? Why are we opening up our doors more? Why are we actively trying to be more hospitable and be more compliant and be more accessible beyond the legal aspects, right? Because there is no legal aspect right now to force us to do sensory-friendly performances, for example. And why are we telling our producers they need to shell out $400,000 to do a friendly performance? Because that's what it costs. And you're talking $400,000 or $500,000. Why are we doing that? I don't know the answer to why, but that is why I focus on like the Grandma Millie effect when we talked about hearing loss, right? That is a very tangible why. It increases ticket sales, it increases audiences, it expands our scope. That helped us get to here. The second thing is being very honest with yourself about how you're going to be consistent, right? So we had a focus group, and one of our participants' hearing aid went off very loudly. She had two. At Chicago the musical, the conductor heard it and complained to the house manager who was on a mission, and they were trying to blame it on our equipment, they were trying to blame it on everything. The people behind her were complaining and being real jerks. And we kowtowed to those people behind them and seat them in better seats and said, I'm so sorry, I gave them for drinks. And I told the house manager, that is not the way to approach this. But I get it. Do you make everyone happy, or do you let that person know who's sitting behind the person whose hearing aids go off, don't be a jerk, like deal with it. It's gonna be fine. And that is something that a lot of people don't think through. We think, oh, it will be great to have this and to have the people and have these stories represented on stage and be more open. But you have to be tough, and you have to be really prepared for what that's gonna mean to some really overly privileged people who are spending $700, $800, $2,000 ticket to Hamilton, and they have a kid kicking their seat the entire time. What are you going to do about that? Seriously, that is a very real thing. And how you handle that, in my mind, is really illustrative of your commitment to these initiatives. If you're willing to tell someone who paid $3,000 for a seat to Hamilton, you need to shut up, this is just how it works, then you mean it. And if you're not, you need to re-examine if you really mean it or not, truthfully. That's the things, and that's why it's so difficult in the theater ownership side, because we really want to make sure that people have a great time, no matter who they are. And so that balance can be difficult, but those are the two things you really have to consider if you're being serious about this. For the record, we don't people to shut up, we're very nice about it, but like, that's the thing to think about it.
And Dario, che cosa pensi che si possa fare? L'hai già detto, in qualche modo per includere sempre di più questi ragazzi nel teatro, ma anche nella società?
Ma guarda, secondo me sì, secondo me prima di tutto sensibilizzare le istituzioni, perché non so qua in America, ma in Italia per me è stata una battaglia sicuramente vinta, perché se sono riuscito ad aprire il primo corso universitario al mondo di teatro integrato delle emozioni con ragazzi con problematiche molto serie, la battaglia è stata vinta, però bisogna assolutamente convincere le istituzioni, ma secondo me cioè bisogna far capire alla gente che noi dobbiamo utilizzare, dobbiamo integrare per quello che sanno fare questi ragazzi, cioè c'è troppa demagogia in giro quando senti qualcheduno che dice io adesso faccio diventare questo normale, li dobbiamo far diventare normali. No, li dobbiamo integrare per quello che sanno fare. Se noi riusciamo a far capire alla gente come fanno i bambini giocano con i bambini schizofrenici, giocano con i bambini autistici, i bambini giocano con i down, i bambini giocano con tutti, perché il bambino ha una dimensione talmente pura della vita che accetta di giocare con chiunque. Poi siamo noi dei gran figli della mignotta, che quando cominciamo a capire come funziona il mondo, con i soldi, con tutta la merda che ci circonda, quello lì ci sta sul cazzo perché non serve a niente. Invece no, serve anche a lui, serve anche lui in questa società. E allora qua dobbiamo veramente cercare il lavoro più grande, di far capire alla gente che probabilmente loro sanno mettere solamente delle virgole in un grande testo letterario, non sanno scrivere il titolo, non sanno scrivere le frasi, non sanno mettere le composizioni dei concetti, dei verbi, ma sanno mettere le virgole, e per fare un grande libro ci vuole anche la virgola.
For sure, it's a matter of bringing awareness to institutions. First of all, which he again mentioned that he was able to create this college course, degree for people with disabilities to train in theater, and so it's a battle at an institutional level to bring this awareness. At least, right. But then beyond that it's a matter of reaching people and making people understand on an individual level that we must not attempt to make these people with disabilities fit into molds of what we think is normal, what we think they should be able to do, but embracing what it is that they can do and embracing what they're bringing, because it is just as fundamental. And he brings the example of children who will play with anybody and not pass judgment and just absolutely be open to any kind of other child that crosses their paths. And it's only as we then grow up and start to get our ideas about what's functional to society, where money comes from, that we kind of start placing a value judgment on who is worth what. Whereas we're all to be appreciated and empowered for the things that we can do, because using the image that Dario used, somebody who has a different ability may not be the one to write the title of the great book or write the words in the great book, but they may be able to add all the punctuation, and we need that as well.
And on that note, yes, thank you. Thank you. With our very last panel, which is really theater across communities, because, of course, being the Italian Theater Festival and Italian Theater Company, I just hoping that Italians smoke. So they're outside because they couldn't smoke for 1 hour, so they're outside smoking. Okay. So I want to introduce you Valeria Orani, who is the producer of Echoes, that tonight, in a couple of hours, is going on here on this stage. 369 gradi, diciamolo in italiano. And Humanism. Erwin Maas, artistic director of ISPA, International Society for Performing Arts. Aiza Fatima, who is a producer, artist, and also Aiza was producing a festival on Asian arts. You're still doing it, right?
It's evolved a little bit. Yeah, we'll talk more about it. It's happening under a different name now. But
okay. And Joanna Sherman, who I know for 20 years, I think, more or less. Joanna does a fantastic work with Bond Street Theater, and they go to refugee camps and they work with refugees. And it's an amazing work they do. And actually, you have a small presentation for us, just to show something that you do. Please, yeah. I'll give you first the stage, and then, yes.
Okay, well,
so.
Then I guess I have to start this slideshow.
Yeah. Julian, can we start, maybe just
He showed me, I have to go like this.
Are you ready with the slideshow? Yes.
Yes? Yes. Okay. We'll see if this works. I just set it on so it's going to automatically go forward. It's not really connected with the talk precisely like a PowerPoint. So, thank you. So we do a lot of different kinds of work around the world in post-war areas, conflict areas, refugees, areas of poverty, conflict, whatever. And we've been doing this for 20, 25 years. I was just going to talk about two projects that we're doing currently. One is in Afghanistan. We're working with youth in Afghanistan. We've been working there since 2003. And we've worked with women, children, police, men, religious leaders, just really every phase of society. And, I think in our beginning years, we worked solely with artists. You have your local partners, and they were usually an arts group. And we decided that, it was actually better to work in partnership with artists, but also with like a legal aid or human rights organizations. So lately, we've been doing this kind of work. Our youth group in Afghanistan, we've been working with 100 youth from all across Afghanistan. And they're doing a project on corruption and rule of law, which is a major problem in Afghanistan, but also I think we have our fair share of corruption in this country as well.
And in Italy as well. We're all together.
Exactly. The corruption in Afghanistan is kind of taken for granted. For example, it's taken for granted that you would have to pay a bribe to the police before you open your shop. And you would just do that every day. And so the youth, through the theater, are creating shows that illustrate the actual rule of law and where they can go for access to justice, because I think people don't realize they can do that. And in the rural areas, the corruption or the the absence of rule of law is a little bit more dire in that people are still attached to this kind of traditional, customary law that has nothing to do with Islamic law or governmental law. It's these ancient traditions like you can sell your daughter to pay back a debt, or you can marry your daughter at age 12, or trade your children, just these kind of traditional things that are really not really helpful for anybody. So they're doing shows to illustrate, no, the actual law is thus. I see that the photographs, I think it just keeps on going, is that correct? Yeah, it's like a loop?
Yes.
Great, we'll have a little review. I also wanted to talk about, we started 4 all-women's troupes, and the all-women's troupes, since women can't perform for men, they can perform for women. So they can do performances in women's prisons, in shelters, even in women's homes. They will go into the home, do a show about women's rights, just for the women in the neighborhood. And they're so delighted to have someone go into their house and do a show for them that they say, oh, do it again. And then they do the show again, and they all have tea and some cookies, and they'll say, oh, do it one more time, and they'll do it again. So sometimes they're doing the show like 2 and 3 times. It's really fantastic. Moving along to this second thing I wanted to mention. All of our shows have post-show where we get the audience up, like a forum theater style, where you do a short presentation and then you get the audience up. And they're very willing to do this, and they're very happy to do this. People really love theater, and they're really always willing to learn something from theater. It really, really works. Here we are meeting with the community leaders. Before you do a show anywhere, you have to meet with the community leaders and get them involved and on your side, or it's just not possible. In Malaysia, we're working with refugees. And we're working with the wide range of refugees that end up in Malaysia, because Malaysia, as a moderate Muslim country, is attracting an enormous number of refugees. This is not in the news very much. Nobody hears about Malaysia very much. But enormous number of refugees from Iraq, from Afghanistan, Syria, Palestine, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen. It's really amazing. And Rohingya. And so we were working specifically with the Rohingya community and the Somali community. With the Rohingya women, primarily, we formed, of course, a women's theater company. And in this case, we were working with a legal aid organization called Asylum Access. And I think, this is very timely, actually. That was a picture of them doing their PowerPoint presentation. They bring information to refugees about their rights and resources, but they were doing it with PowerPoints in English. So that was not really very effective for anybody. They would show these PowerPoints in English, nobody would understand a word they were saying. So we came along and said, well, we will enact what information you had in your PowerPoint. And that's what we did, working with a local theater company, Masakini Theater, they're fabulous. We created these short sketches that illustrated these points that about where can you send your child to school, because refugees are not really allowed to go to the normal schools. What happens if you break your arm, because they're not really allowed to go to the normal hospital. They're not allowed to work, so how do you get a job? And you're rather vulnerable to exploitation in that situation. So their rights, the minimal rights that they have, where do they seek access to justice in these situations? So what Asylum Access was doing was excellent, but they really did need that theatrical voice to translate the information in a way that people of any language can understand. It was mostly nonverbal, with little signs and just single word things that were translated, and it was very, very effective. And then the women started to create their own work on topics that was of interest to them, and I think we saw a little bit of them with the women with the police on the back. That was them creating their show about what happened to them in their life, being contacted by the police, because it's very easy to get stopped by the police and then you're put in jail, and what happens to you, put in jail. So this was very, very effective, and yeah, I think we've looked through it a couple of times, and so that's pretty much what we're up to now, and we'll be doing
the little work that they do. The very little work that they do.
Yes. We keep busy.
Yes. I'll give to Aiza. what is it that you did with your festival and with your community, because you are very into your community with Asian artists.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I'm an actor trained, never wrote anything. I took a class. I started writing this play. It was a one-woman show. It's a comedy about Muslim American Pakistani female identity, and it just, I feel like I'm like an accidental everything. I'm like the accidental actor, I'm an accidental feminist, I'm an accidental producer. It's just not something I ever set out to do, but I've kind of keep filling these roles that I need to fill because it's hard for me to see work about my diaspora being produced. Nobody's really doing it or writing it. I was working at Google at the time, actually, and I'd finished this like 2-year conservatory. And then I started writing. It was like this evening class. I took a solo show writing class, and I wrote this one-woman show, which is Dirty Packy Lingerie. And I started performing it, and that led me to actually Pakistan with the U.S. State Department. In 2012, I did a tour there in 4 cities. And it was actually, the tour was, so it's like an artist exchange. It's like American artists go over there and mingle with like Pakistani artists. And but then I just thought, I was like, oh, great. I get to go to another country and do my show. How awesome. My parents are from Pakistan. I hadn't been in like, I don't know how many years. Like since I was 12 was the last time I had gone. And then in 2012, I went again. And it really flipped the whole thing for me, because when I was leaving, everybody in the US from my theater community, which was mostly white people, everybody was like, oh my God, you're gonna go empower those women. How amazing. And honestly, I went there and I got empowered. I just had no idea what I was in for. And I got so inspired by what I was saying. I was so inspired, I came back and I started talking to all these huge organizations like Sundance and the LARC, Play Development. I was like, hey guys, let's do a play exchange with like, you know, artists in Pakistan. Bring them over here, we go over there, like let's start something. I tried for like 3 years to get this thing off the road. It just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And then something else flipped. It was then maybe, now fast forward to like 2015 maybe, and I just realized, I was like, you know, I keep trying to go back there. I don't know why, because there's so much work that needs to get done here in my own backyard, right? And I think it's so interesting, like when I first started performing this play, which was in 2011, and started getting more into the artistic world, there wasn't this language of this hyphenate. It didn't exist within the Muslim American community or the Pakistani American community. We were just like, you're Pakistani or you're American, you know? And I think over the years that's really shifted, where this became part of our lexicon. We're like, oh no, we are Pakistani American Muslims. This is who we are. We're, you know, it's like all these hyphenates, right? And we kind of figured out a language to talk about ourselves. So as this was happening, it was a group of like 4 of us, including me and 3 other people. We decided to create a festival around this. So it became a South Asian International Festival of Performing Arts. And we just kind of pooled our resources. We made 0 money. We worked like 80-hour weeks, and we had 200 artists. You know, as it is when you do a festival, right, on a
Yes.
budget, calling in,
Yes.
it's really begging,
Yes.
beg, borrow, and steal. You know, and we ended up programming 200 artists from all over the world.
200.
200 artists, and there were people who came from like Canada, from India. We were trying to get people from Pakistan, but like they couldn't get visas. So you know, because that's a big thing. When you come from the Muslim world, you're like really screwed at so many levels. So especially coming into the U.S. And now I don't even want to know now what that's like. So in Europe, and you know, so we had people from Asia. People came from all over, really. And then, so we did the festival. It was amazing, and you know, it was a lot of work. Nobody got paid anything. Nobody made any money, and it was just so exhausting. I just kind of took a step back after that, and I was like, okay, I'm like 3 years into my own career as an artist, and I'm already sitting in this chair of being a producer. It feels really weird. Like I don't feel like I deserve to be at that table. I don't have enough life experience or enough art experience to be at this table, but I am, because no one else is doing it. You know, and I often find myself just doing these things. I just produced a feature film
with, again, it's like a very international cast from like Bollywood and like some like people you may have heard of, like you know, from the U.S. and stuff. And it's just, again, it's just like I'm having to do my own work because it's just like really hard to find partners to do it with you when you're kind of you're like the first one doing it. It's never been done before, so it's like showing people that you can create art that is about brown Muslim women and it can commercially do well. You know, I'm just like in the process of figuring all of this out as I go along. I think, and I constantly find myself in the same position every year, pretty much, as a producer, as an artist, like reinventing the whole thing and rethinking how I'm going to go about doing this. So, so the South Asian International Performing Arts Festival is actually continuing to happen. I stepped back from it these last 2 years because it just was, I just felt like I need to like fill my own well as an artist before I like really jump into this whole thing of like trying to give other people a voice. And I've kind of found other ways to do that. So I do write a lot and I produce a lot of my own work and, you know, and partner up with other people who can help me do that. So I think for me it's become really important to create a place for artists of color. You know, whether it's in theater or in film or, you know, online, whatever that form kind of takes, that's sort of the work that I end up gravitating towards. And yeah, again, I just feel myself finding like there's no one else doing it, so I guess I'll do it. That's kind of where I am right now.
Thank you. And I don't know if this I think I may be off, completely off. Maybe now. Maybe they work too much today. Erwin, you have an experience on in international performing arts. What is it your experience about communities? One of the things that, you know, as I was saying, is the first time no one else was doing it. This is how I started the Italian Theatre Company, the Italian Theatre Festival. No one else was doing it, and I was like, it needs to be done somehow. And I think that Dario, you know, is really the example. He did, no one else was doing it, e nessuno lo stava facendo, so he did it. Is that, you know, and no one else was doing it. Because I remember 20 years ago, John, I was like, the first time I met them, and I was like, oh, they're doing fantastic. Actually, I remember I saw a show at the Theater for the New City. Yeah, I was like, and I was like, wow.
But it was so hard to get visas for Africa.
Yeah. And actually, before you start, I want to acknowledge the presence of Chris Massimin, ciao, who is together with me because I don't have anything to do during the day and the month and the year. We are part of the executive board of the Immigrant Arts Coalition. Is a new coalition that has just formed, and I actually asked him to be here just, you know, to be the coalition here because I cannot be everything. And so thank you, Chris, for coming, and if you want to comment later. And also Chris is the director of the National Yiddish Theatre. Anyway, your experience in communities and, you know, crossing communities. I don't think they're working. I think they're gone. Yes, you're an artist. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's a rather broad one. As we wear many hats, of course. I actually really love the fact that you had a panel just about inclusion and then a panel about internationality, because I think they're very related.
Yeah. And this is why I asked Dario also to stay.
Yeah, because I honestly believe that they're all about inclusion. Yeah. And the more we get international, the more we will be inclusive, and the more we get inclusive, the more we will also go beyond our horizons. And the whole time an image comes up for me that went viral last year, that I'm sure people have seen. It went over on Facebook, and this image of the two people standing opposite of a 9 or a 6. And one person sees the 6 and the other person sees the 9, and then they're saying, just because you are right doesn't mean I'm wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side yet. And I think when it comes to inclusion and internationality, that's really what we're all doing the whole time. So I've been I'm a theatre maker myself from the Netherlands, based here in New York. I've worked quite internationally, and there's a couple of projects that come up because now I've been quite fortunate by being for a short time the cultural attaché for the Dutch Embassy in the US. I got into a lot of these international organizations such as ISPA or IPE.
And can you explain what is this? ISPA
ISPA
for
is
our
the
Italian.
ISPA is the International Society for Performing Arts, and IPE is the International Performing Arts for Youth, which basically are two big platforms or gateways into the, in this case I would say predominantly Anglo theatre world, although ISPA obviously is very internationally focused. And they are conferences, big conferences and showcases where artists from all over the world get to pitch their work, get to speak with one another, showcase their work, and this is all happening in January during what we here in New York know as Performing Arts Madness Month, because there's all the festivals happening in New York, APEP, which is really more a marketplace. Yeah. And that is my experience from working now a lot in Africa and in Europe and here.
Because you also run a festival in Africa.
No, it's something else. I'll bring that up in a second. But I think my experience coming from the non-Anglo world into predominantly English world, I worked a lot in Australia and in England and here, is actually kind of the market mentality. Because even those gateways that we know of now here in New York, they're not very familiar in Europe or Africa or Asia or even South America. There the connection happens much more via festivals. So we're really seeing work from each other, we're buying work from each other through festivals. Whereas in the English-speaking world, there's really these marketplaces, these showcases where we pitch work to one another. And it's a little bit less of a festival mentality, I would say. That's one thing. Then the other thing I wanted to bring up is that when it comes to community, I think it really is a lot about who holds the key, who is the gatekeeper. And not until we start to change who the gatekeepers are, will we be able to really change inclusivity, internationality. And I just want to focus on one project that I was fortunate to work with in England, with the Arts Council England. They have a fantastic program run by the Director of Diversity. They actually have a Director of Diversity, can you imagine? Abid, he's Pakistani, yes.
Yeah, I met him when I was touring in 2016.
Yeah, he's a dear friend of mine. He's a fantastic, fantastic human being. But they started something called the Changemaker program. And I think it's really a phenomenal project regarding bringing these two panels that you just had together on internationality and inclusivity. So the changemakers are people that come from a minority or that are considered minority or disability or anything in the diversity realm.
Changemakers?
Changemakers. So that means LGBTQ, that means racial, ethnic, disability, all of it. And they are partnered with major institutions, not only in the performing arts, also in the visual arts, museums, theaters, and their role is really to basically disrupt the organization and to look at programming and to look at the way things function, to look at the board, to look at staff. Because I keep thinking, and also in Africa, I remember South Africa in this particular case, after apartheid, where the theaters all of a sudden used to be run by white South Africans, all Afrikaans speaking, and all of a sudden they had to change over, and they said, now we need to address, or we need to attract this audience that was predominantly black. But who were the people at the table? They were all white men. Yeah. So similarly, a very different thing with the performing arts for youth. A lovely project in Denmark, for example. Why are they so far along in their programming for young audiences? Is because they get the children involved in the programming. Yeah. Whereas generally, it is adults talking about what do we need to program for children. So it is basically, I mean, you asked in the panel before, what do we need to do, or what is an example? Honestly, what we need to do is just reach out our hand. We need to cross that way. And maybe lastly, this project in Africa, indeed, this is called the Pan-African Creative Exchange that I'm working with a lot of local artists there. This happened to talk about accessibility, I guess. In 2015, there was a report of the United Nations that of all the global creative output, may it be touring, selling of work, exchange, residencies, of all the global output, only 1% came from the African continent, which is shocking, knowing how huge Africa is and how much creativity there is happening there. We all know the reasons why, money, contacts, all of those things. And that kind of led to a conversation in South Africa at that time, with artists, very diverse group of artists. It was really the CEO of the symphony orchestra and township artists, all at the same table. The CEO of the Arts Council of South Africa, of Namibia, of Tanzania, of Egypt. They were all present, and there was this conversation happening that now led into this, what we call the Pan-African Creative Exchange PACE. And it will start this year for the first time. And it really is a gathering where it's kind of like a combination of the Anglo marketplace world and the festival circuit that is more known elsewhere, where it is part of a festival, but people get to pitch their work, showcase their work, and there will be a conversation about talking about the discourse of work coming from Africa, because I think there's a lot of problems with that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a blah because there's a lot of stuff that I'm involved with.
This is why you're here.
Yeah, and I guess that's besides my own work. I've worked a lot actually with different communities as a theater maker and still do. But probably one of the things that I would look at as myself, or that I'm constantly being called, is a connector. And that's also how I look at it. And I think from a, how do you say that, a cultural diplomatic stance, we are not that different from artists, or artists are not that different from the international reaching out. In the end, it all is about curiosity. We want to be curious. We want to know about the other. And I think that's why culture and art is so good, is such a good form for that. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. and now, Valeria, you represent Italy in this case, even though you live here and you do.
You represent Italy, first of all.
Yeah, I do. But you cannot. What is your experience in crossing communities in Italian theater and in Europe now that you are in the States and work in the States? So there is in Italy, we can also ask our Italian artists, but there is you there. There is in Italy a way to cross communities, or we do theater only for a certain kind of.
I want to bring my experience because I'm a producer, not artist. So I think I'm the only one here. So,
but we all produce, we're also producers.
Yeah, but as I told, is a necessity to be producer. Yeah. But for me, it's a choice. I choose not to stay on the stage as an actress or other part of the show than technician. So staying in the back, I try to figure out what was my wonderful world in my mind, And my wonderful world was all the art connected with the same time, in the same time. So the inclusive part for my life started to see together art as a theater, dance, music, food, design, everything together. And it starts my my adventure after many years as a production assistant and other roles in the industry. To start my adventure, to put together all this stuff, and I built 369 degrees. There is not 360 degrees, but is 9 degree more. So is that something doesn't exist, of course. It's a mistake, as all the good things in life are mistakes, no? So it was my start in 2003, while I was working for a company in Italy. It brings me to use all my money that I raised with my work to a second work that was my 369 degrees. And
Production company.
Yeah, no, the production arrived after, because my challenge was to offer some kind of services to all the contemporary community. There was without any help, without any effort, without any sustain by press office, promotion, and this world was very, very separate. In Italy, if in 2003, if you engaged a press office, you had to pay 5,000 euros for one show. And I started to study a low-budget model as a low-budget airfares, the same. And I put this kind of suggestion in theater. So giving to everybody associated a good service, a professional one, but with 10% of the fee of normal services. And I started this wave that was contagious, so it was good, because now everybody do the same. I think now I destroy completely the market of the press office in Italy, but not for the mainstream, of course, but for the contemporary theater. You can't pay more than 500 euros now.
So in working like that, how do you see the crossing communities also within Italy? Because I feel like we talked many times, there is the mainstream, there is a small stream, there are different kind of theaters, different kind of audiences.
Yes.
And also I don't think we have any ethnic theater, so we don't have like someone. We do we?
Yeah, we have Dario. We have.
But it's not ethnic.
No. I talk about the differences. We have a lot of differences, but we have a lot of differences also in the audience. Yeah. So it's very sectorial.
Yeah.
And you have mainstream, okay. And then in the contemporary scene, you can see a lot of research and a lot of artists that wrote their protest in
the play.
Yeah. So they use their own work to protest somehow. So it closed the audience also to some people that knows that if I go there, I see my friends, I see. This is strange, but it's
a close
really like this. Also, Marco can confirm. Is a lot of communities in a community that is not a community. So it's caring, and this is why I want to open more, and also because I come from a mainstream theater, and I can't stay in a theater that don't consider each other, because it's strange.
Yeah.
Also because some theater lives with the money, and some other theaters don't live at all.
Yeah.
Because don't have any money. So it's incredible. So this was my departure, and then when I arrived here, I do other things, but inspired by my experience.
Actually, one thing I want to ask, and I want to ask also, well, I'll ask also Dario, how crossing communities, how is it possible, how much funds there are? Ci sono fondi quando si tenta di fare cose particolari. There are funds to do it. It's possible because, you know, usually it's the mainstream, but there are funds. How much funds there are actually to really do the work that we do?
Yeah, it's not much funds to do, say, work with refugees. It's not terribly well funded. I mean, there's certain things through the State Department, but anybody who's written a State Department grant, they're highly complicated. We get funding from the State Department through various bureaus, and but you know, it's you don't feel like it, and they want you to work with the community. I mean, I think this is really a big thing right now. If you're going to move any kind of situation forward, like a political situation, you have to involve the community. The community is the motivator. So, say working with the women in Afghanistan, for example, we got money because they want to see, I guess, our U.S. State Department wants to see women more involved, because women as peacemakers, and the idea that women can be peacemakers. It's like, well, they don't fight, so they're not in the conversation. It's like, oh, yes, they are. Yeah. Because women are raising the children. And if children see violence in their homes from day one, they realize if you want to solve a problem, it's solved by violence. So you have to work on all levels of society, all levels of the community. So, and the United States Institute of Peace is another place that has given us money to work with communities on various levels.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of me producing the work, I mean, for the festivals that we put together, the South Asian Festival, they're just like so hard. We've gone to sort of the local community here, the South Asian community, to get funding from them. They're incredibly rich. There are people out there, but the South Asian and the Muslim communities in the U.S., guys, hate to say it, they don't believe in the arts. They're like, we're immigrants who came here to work hard and make money. Like, what is this art? You know? No, they're like, become a doctor and a lawyer, get a real job. It's a very tough sale. I mean, I struggled with it for a very long time. To tell my parents that, hey, I work at Google as an engineer, now I'm gonna go be an artist. I couldn't even tell them. My dad found out because I ended up on NPR talking about dirty baggy lingerie, and he heard it. He's like, "What's this? Lingering-doo-doo?" And I'm like, you know. So then we could have an open conversation, but before then I didn't even have the vocabulary to talk to my own family about what I really want to do. So there's that within the community. Sometimes I've also had funding coming through the State Department. In Pakistan, the tour was funded. I went to Turkmenistan. It was funded there through the State Department. You know, it's really hard. And then crossing over is not something I've ever actually thought about, and be like, okay, I'm going to cross over. But to be honest, when you create art and you live in New York, who goes to see theater here? Middle class, middle-aged white people. I've already crossed over that community, you know, I'm brown, right? So for me, it was the opposite. It's like, how do I get brown people to come to the theater and see this art I've created about them? I had to get really creative because not only do they not support the arts, they also don't believe in going to see theater. I mean, it's a very tough sale. And it's interesting, though, what I found in the US at least, and even in the UK. I mean, we ended up doing, just in 2016, a 16-city tour, 15-city tour. The 16th city fell through because the title was too risque for them. But we ended up doing a 15-city tour, and then it was like this struggle sometimes. Like, okay, we're in Manchester, and or we're in Glasgow. Like, how do we get people to come out and see this play? And it was interesting. The promoter, who was local, was actually Pakistani British, and had a lot of contacts within that community. So we had 200 people. The theater filled with 200 people were Muslim women. It was so specific. A lot of them hijabis, where they cover their hair. In Glasgow, who came to see the show, right? And in London, the audience was always very mixed. And it's so interesting. And in New York, it's always very white. And the brown people will come when I've done very specific outreach to them. And it's been okay, you know, reaching out to professional organizations, there's you know, the Arab American Association. There's it's called the New York, whatever the professional organizations are for like, Muslim or South Asian people. When I do the reach out, and I think now some of my work has been like, it's been around for 6 years or so now. It's had enough press behind it that like people will come and support it. That it has a bit of a following. So just for me, but like even when we did the South Asian International Performing Arts Festival, I think the big thing was like we really struggled with the audience. It was in the summertime, it was a tricky time, getting the funding, and there was just a lot of barriers. I think it's like a constant battle. You just have to come up with really creative ways, and I think there is money out there, and I think there is a huge audience out there as well.
Yeah.
You just have to reach out to them. I mean, I did the first show I did in the UK was like in the middle of nowhere in a fishing village, and that like fishing village. I've never even heard. I think it's called Blackbird. I don't even know. I never even heard of this place. So I go in and perform, and it's a 430-seat theater. They've sold it out. White people, fishermen. I'm like, how did you get them to come see my show? And they were really creative. They started a conversation around the play. The local guy who ran that theater company went to the press, and it was just like, okay, some people are asking us to change the title of this play. Should we or should we? Because Paki in Europe and actually also Canada means it's like the N-word. It's like calling the black person the N-word in their culture, not in America. So they started a conversation around that. Like, do we censor artists when they come to different cultures and perform for them? Or do we let the artist own their work? Because when the show was created, it wasn't created with that in mind, that Paki was a curse word. So this guy started this conversation within the local community, and he just did enough buzz for the show that he was able to get this huge audience to come. And it was an amazing experience because these guys saw themselves in this very much a brown, female, Muslim American show. And the same thing happened again in Scotland. I was performing in Inverness in a very large theater, most all white. And Inverness is in Scotland, where like the Loch Ness Monster lives nearby. That's like how I know Inverness now. So it was the same thing. And we always do talkbacks, and during the talkback, one of the women said, I really saw my dad in that pushy grandma character who's like trying to set everybody up on a date. Like that's really like my Scottish white father. So, sometimes you can cross. I guess it's just like when the art is really specific, it becomes universal.
Yeah, sure.
I think both with funding as well as with connection, in the end I do think a lot is about network also. We tend to think a lot very quickly about the funds, whereas if we think more about the what instead of the how, I think the how will come. And we tend to be bogged down a lot by, we want to do something and immediately we're thinking about how we have to do it.
And we
then
can't
all of a sudden that what becomes this small. Whereas if we keep focusing on the what, and we just stay focused on the what, I'm sure that's what you did, I'm sure that's what you did, like then the stuff is coming because it attracts people and it attracts funds. And of course funding will always be difficult, but there are ways. I mean, there's so many different pots of money, and yes, it almost you need an education to find out where they all are. But there are fantastic ways, such as embassies. I mean, a lot of people don't look at embassies. The Fulbright, for example. I know in Europe, because of the EU, there's now also funds available, not for bilateral connections, so from Italy to America, but if Italy works with, if an Italian artist works with another artist in Europe, and then they work with somebody in America as well, then all of a sudden there's a lot of funds available. So there's all these different things there. I do think that honestly, the idea of selling work and presenting work abroad by bringing entire shows over is a little bit of an old-fashioned idea. Don't get me wrong, I think it still needs to happen, but I think the much more sustainable ways are artist-to-artist connections, are artist-to-artist exchanges, residencies in that sense, fellowships in that sense. So instead of me making a work here and trying to bring that over there is indeed what you're doing also, is me going over there and making the work there with the local community. And then all of a sudden there's much more funding available. So it's thinking about different ways of working also, and not only state media.
I totally agree with Erwin. I produce in Italy, but my only show I bring here is Echoes, because it could be possible thanks to the actors and thanks to the small size of the project. But all the other projects I produce, I can't imagine to bring here because it's too expensive, for example, and also the language is a problem for me. And I work on the Italian playwrights project here and American playwrights project in Italy, just to bring this connection. So what I missed was that a lot of good playwrights in Italy were not well known outside Italy. Thanks to a project that is EU connected with Fabula Mundi, is very well known in France, in Belgium, in Romania, in Spain, but not in English language. So it was a deficit, for me, for us. And I had the opportunity to start this project to bring Italian plays to be translated and published, and I love that. But I was more interested also to bring American in Italy too, not only Italian here in US. And I started this connection for Italian playwrights 3 years ago, and this year, in the second edition of Italian Playwrights, I started the first edition of American Playwrights Project that is creating a very nice community, and also take care of other roles in the industry, so translators, dramaturgists, and publishers, editors. And I think it's very important also to spread the word. So.
And actually, I would like to, Chris, can you come 1 second in front? Because we have to almost leave the stage, but what I would like to invite you to, if we can, for whoever can stay, we can move to the garden, because there is a beautiful garden upstairs and we can talk. I just wanted to tell you, this is one of the reasons that we did this conference, and this year we're having during the festival a lot of moments of getting together with the local artists, because it's important for Italian artists who come here and they very jealously bring their shows here in New York to meet and see what is going on, because this is what happened to me in 23 years of New York, how much I've seen. And when was the first time in New York for you?
1980.
1980. So it's really to meet, and it opened up so much that my eyes, my really desire to do different things, and especially in this time where it seems that we are building more than walls. There is all this. Even in Italy, I'm from Milan, I'm from Rome, or there is all this very kind of being separated. I want to be in my region, and I want to be there. What we need to do is really, instead, to talk to each other, and curiosity, and really cross over to the other communities. I just want to, again, because this is a fourth time, we can all move to the garden. I'm kind of improvising here, but it's okay. Because then Icos can set up, because I see already the director there who is killing me with his eyes, like, because at 6 p.m. we have a sold out show. Unfortunately, we have a sold out show. With Chris, we created this Immigrant Arts Coalition, and I just want to, tell everyone what it's about, and So we can, and then we can continue, but I really want to continue this conversation upstairs. Okay.
Cool. But before, can I embarrass you? Can we give her a round of applause? I'm gonna be a weirdo and scooch back. I'm a weirdo. I'm happy with that. I'm proud of that.
We say this space to do that.
Perfect. It fits in great. So, a lot of important things were talked about in this discussion. You said something about the universality of being specific, and I'm a big believer of that, and I say that with everything kind of I'm looking at. Diversity is a strength, and it's not a weakness, and I do believe in the power of conversation. And I actually have a question for everyone, if I may, before we start, which is
If it doesn't kill you, yes.
No, okay, don't kill me. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
But if
Only
everyone
the-
on this panel could give me quickly, like, if there was one action you can enroll this audience and to walk away with to help continue this conversation, what would that be?
One action.
One action.
Un'azione che possono far fare a voi nel lasciare questo teatro, quale sarebbe? Per qualcosa che può lasciarvi dentro.
All right.
Okay, get ready. Put your hands out. Keep your fingers crossed. On your nose. Okay, let's try it one more time. Okay, because we don't have much time, I'll give you the secret right away. Put the pinky on top of the arm that's on top. Now keep your fingers crossed. Oh, I do this sometimes in refugee camps because, you know, if you're working with children and they don't speak your language, you can do this for quite some time, so. Easy.
This is an action, right? What action you can do. I think whatever things, organizations you're part of, look around the table, see who's not on it, and think about how you can get those people on it. Like if you really want diversity, if you really want inclusion, it can't just be, you know, it has to be like a top-down thing and a bottom-up, but you have to tackle it from very different angles. And if like people like me are sitting at the table, we are not part of the conversation. Don't create work about me. Invite me to your table. Let me create it with you. I mean, I hope that makes sense.
Di guardare intorno al tavolo e guardare chi non c'è e invitarlo al vostro tavolo.
Yeah, I mean, mine, I guess, is a little bit more boring, but it's keep doing what you're doing. I think we are living in a time where we need more art, not less. The world is really, really asking for it. So the action would be to make more.
Yeah, and I add beauty. We need more beauty. Because art is so intellectual for me, so I agree with Dario. We need to research the beauty in everything.
Comunque volevo dire una cosa, che secondo me il teatro... Carlotta, dov'è Carlotta?
Sono qui.
Bravissima. Che secondo me il teatro fatto in certe situazioni come l'ha fatto, lo fa lei, che è straordinario, o anche è meglio non sovvenzionarlo, perché quel tipo di teatro può essere più forte di una bomba atomica. E allora è meglio non sovvenzionare, come non viene sovvenzionato il mio teatro, e più di una volta sono stato minacciato dalle case farmaceutiche che mi avrebbero fatto fuori.
What do you say? Sure. Maybe Dario thinks it is better that theater made in certain circumstances, like for instance the Bond Street Theater, is better if maybe it shouldn't be subsidized, because as it were, it is more powerful than an atomic bomb might be. So what if we really found that power out? So just like his theater is not subsidized, maybe it shouldn't be.
And let's finish with just saying, and then we have to run because of the way they kill me.
So I'll be very...
Just a very big brief, and then we'll go upstairs. Yes.
Okay, so just very quickly, so art influences culture, right? Culture with more hands in the pot gets things done, because having that cross-cultural dialogue and discussion is important. It's not just art that affects the art. Art also affects the world and economic growth, sustainable thinking, and also creative thinking, right? With art, instead of solving problems with violence, you can solve them with words. there are a lot of issues that need to be tackled. And though we're a baby group, the Immigrant Arts Coalition goes to see and be an answer to all these problems. So we work in areas of diversity support. We work with lawmakers for advocacy. We work with other institutions and collaborators. We have over 50 different multicultural theaters just in the city alone that have joined us. We're really only less than a year into it, but we're already reaching things on the national stage. We're working with the immigrant, basically all the immigrant organizations you can kind of think of. We're an official partner with the Mayor's Office of Immigration and Affairs. We are also out there with all the entertainment unions, and we have all their support, which is great because sometimes getting those all on the same page is very challenging, but together and in tandem. And our president actually is one of the members of 802, which is the musicians union. We can get things done. So again, one conversation at a time will help us become a fuller, more important, more understanding world. And we have a second annual Immigrant Arts Summit, which is happening July 5th through the 8th, the Museum of Jewish Heritage. August, she's right, August 5th through 8th at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. It's going to be great. Together we can change the world. Please, one conversation.
And we can continue the conversation upstairs.